Famitsu was an otaku who deeply loved Akihabara's unique culture. One day, he got caught up in a battle against mysterious creatures called the Bud Ones, who attack humans and turn them into monsters. After being saved by a girl named Madame, Famitsu joined her in fighting these Bud Ones in an unusual way, by stripping off their clothes so that sunlight could hit their skin and destroy them. Together with his friends, he made it his mission to protect Akihabara and the otaku lifestyle he cherished so much. The story began when Akihabara was attacked by vampire-like creatures known as the Bud Ones. A man named Famitsu and Madame worked together to fight them. The only way to defeat those creatures was by removing their clothes, since their bodies were highly sensitive to the open air. One day, Famitsu was running alone trying to escape from a woman who kept chasing him. Exhausted, he stopped to catch his breath, only to realize that she was already right behind him. Famitsu immediately ran again to avoid her. He thought he had managed to lose her, but the woman found him once more. She persistently tried to convince Famitsu to buy a piece of artwork worth 950,000 yen, even offering him a 5-year installment plan. She urged him to come back to the gallery and fill out some paperwork. Famitsu agreed on one condition, that she would join him in his battle. He then claimed that he was Prince Mabu-ni, sent to Earth by the space goddess Goldeva from the 11th world of Tekken Rizzer, on a mission to collect the Mobamo Silitaro emblems. The woman looked terrified as Famitsu continued his bizarre explanation that made no sense at all. She decided to walk away quickly, leaving him behind. Famitsu was surprised that the story he wrote back in middle school actually helped him scare off the gallery woman. Not long after, Famitsu's younger sister Niwaka ran up to him. She looked confused and asked why he had left her when she had told him to wait. Famitsu apologized and explained that he had just been ambushed by a newly revived Yulian. Niwaka had no idea what he was talking about. Famitsu went on to say that Yulians were Akihabara's original monsters that could start a war if too many of them appeared. Niwaka then invited Famitsu to go to animate with her to buy a new manga that came with a special bonus. Famitsu was not interested, but Niwaka begged him to come along so they would not get separated again. She asked him to wait at the nearby figure shop. Suddenly, Niwaka looked up in shock and saw a woman falling from the sky. People screamed in surprise, and some even started taking pictures and recording videos. Famitsu had no idea what was going on and was shocked to see that the woman was perfectly fine after the fall. The woman introduced herself as Matome and warned that the area was dangerous. Sure enough, a group of Bud Ones landed nearby and immediately attacked her. Matome reacted quickly, swinging her baseball bat at them. One of the Bud Ones lunged at her, but she struck back and leaped upward, pulling off the creature's clothing, which rendered it unconscious. She soon realized that the enemies she faced were only low-level Bud Ones. Suddenly, Tsurubashi and his bodyguards appeared. They were local residents of Akihabara who came to announce that the show was over and asked the onlookers to disperse. Famitsu was confused, wondering if what they had just witnessed was merely a performance. Tsurubashi scolded Matome, but she immediately jumped high into the air and disappeared. Tsurubashi rushed off to chase her. Niwaka, meanwhile, commented that the performance had actually been really good. Later, while Niwaka was enjoying some bread, Famitsu looked irritated because he could not find the item he had been searching for at the figure shop. Niwaka asked if what they had seen earlier had any connection to the Bud Ones. The dark rumors surrounding those creatures had been spreading quickly. Niwaka had heard from a classmate's older sister that once someone became a Bud One, they would gain superhuman powers and go on a rampage, attacking others to spread the infection, like a vampire or a zombie. If that rumor were true, it could cause serious trouble, especially since the police were not taking any action and the public thought those incidents were just street performances. Famitsu dismissed the story, saying it was nothing more than a silly urban legend. Many people, he explained, had started trying out new things ever since the Akihabara government lifted the ban on street performances. Niwaka then asked Famitsu to go with her to Adore's cafe, but he refused. She continued to beg him to come along. A moment later, Famitsu received a message from Cage, saying he had found the item Famitsu wanted. Without hesitation, Famitsu left right away, leaving Niwaka behind. She looked disappointed, reminding herself that he had promised to spend the whole day with her. When Famitsu arrived at the store he was looking for, he was completely amazed to find every version of the Anatomy Ranger figures on display. His eyes were immediately drawn to the blue foie gras liver version, a limited edition that had only been available at the Almori event last year. It had been produced again since then because it wasn't popular, so Famitsu couldn't believe such a legendary figure was right there in front of him. He felt like fate itself had brought him to that store to claim the mystical collectible. Just as Famitsu reached out to grab the figure, a girl reached for it at the exact same time. Neither of them wanted to back down. The girl's name was Arisa. She said she had seen the figure first, so it rightfully belonged to her. Famitsu didn't expect her to be that strong. He couldn't even pull the box from her hands. Arisa explained that this rare liver version wasn't just a different color. It had a redesigned body to better reflect the original concept. She wanted to repaint it to match the authentic base color. Famitsu was surprised she even noticed that detail. Arisa admitted she loved the liver figures deeply and asked Famitsu to let her have it. Tematsu became distracted for a moment, and Arisa took the opportunity to snatch the figure from him. Overjoyed, she began spinning around in excitement. Tematsu asked Arisa to at least share what she truly felt about that rare figure. He wanted to talk about the blue liver together and even hope they could become friends through their shared passion. He realized that both he and Arisa had come to Akihabara searching for rare treasures, breathing in the same air of friendship and sharing the same collector's spirit. Arisa was touched by his words, saying that he had spoken straight to her heart. When Tematsu offered a handshake as a friendly introduction, he was secretly planning to grab the figure again. But before he could make a move, a loud crash echoed through the store. Matome suddenly appeared and mentioned something about the Bud Ones before launching an attack on Arisa. Shocked, Arisa quickly dodged Matome's strike. Matome demanded that Arisa reveal her true identity, but Arisa had no idea what she was talking about. Matome insisted that Arisa must be one of the Bud Ones, judging by her unusual outfit and her superhuman strength. Worried that the fight might damage the figures inside the store, Arisa decided to fight back to protect them. Her punches landed solidly, forcing Matome to respond by pushing Arisa away, sending them both crashing out of the store and onto the street. Arisa tried to escape, but Matome chased her relentlessly. Meanwhile, bystanders began recording the fight on their phones. Not long after, Tematsu overheard people talking about an explosion at the Adores Cafe that had just happened that day. He suddenly remembered that Niwaka had wanted to visit that cafe. Panic set in and he ran straight toward the scene. When he arrived, a crowd had already gathered, and Tsuruba she was helping keep people away from the area. Tematsu tried calling Niwaka, but her phone didn't connect. Without hesitation, he rushed inside and climbed to the upper floor. When he opened the door, he saw several customers sitting motionless. He approached one of them to ask about his little sister, but the customer suddenly screamed, startling Tematsu and knocking him to the ground. The people around him looked almost like vampires ready to attack. Terrified, Tematsu froze until someone suddenly tore through the strange energy surrounding those people and they instantly collapsed. It was Matome. She said she had seen Tematsu around before, though she thought he tended to get in her way. Tematsu explained that he was looking for his sister, and as he looked around, he spotted Niwaka lying unconscious on the floor. He rushed to her side, but one of the Bud Ones lunged forward, trying to strike him with a fork. Matome jumped in to protect him, taking the hit on her shoulder. She told Tematsu to take his sister and get out of there. Tematsu hesitated, worried about Matome's injury, but she told him that he was only slowing her down, and that next time she might not be there to save him. After Tematsu left with Niwaka, another Bud One attacked Matome, and she defended herself using the fork and her staff, forcing the enemy back. Tematsu stopped in an empty room, shaken by everything that had just happened. Suddenly, Arisa dropped down from an air vent and greeted him. She said she had been caught up in a chase and that things had turned around unexpectedly. Her clothes had been torn during the fight, so she had changed into something else. Earlier, Matome had chased her down, but later realized that Arisa wasn't one of the Bud Ones and apologized for the misunderstanding. Out of curiosity, Arisa had decided to follow Matome afterward. Tematsu then realized that Matome often stripped her opponents of their outer layers to neutralize them. Arisa looked at Niwaka and teasingly asked if the cute girl with him was his girlfriend. Before Tematsu could answer, Niwaka woke up and said that her older brother didn't have a girlfriend and didn't have many friends either. Tematsu looked annoyed hearing that. Tematsu asked Arisa to take Niwaka somewhere safe. He trusted Arisa because he believed she shared the same spirit and determination as him. Tematsu was determined to go and fight the Bud Ones, but Arisa doubted his ability, thinking his physical strength was below average. However, Tematsu reignited his own fighting spirit by recalling a line from episode 34 of Anatomy Ranger. Arisa was unexpectedly impressed by his passion and decided to support whatever he planned to do. With renewed determination, Tematsu rushed off to help Matome. At that moment, Matome was on a rooftop, surrounded by numerous Bud Ones. To those creatures, Akihabara belonged solely to them, and all humans were meant to obey their rule. The Bud Ones attacked her from every side. At first, Matome managed to dodge their attacks skillfully, but soon her arms were restrained and their leader struck her repeatedly. Bruised and exhausted, she was accused of being a traitor. For a brief moment, Matome wondered if this would be her end. Suddenly, a cloud of gas burst toward the attackers. It was Tematsu who had come to help her. Thanks to his distraction, Matome was able to break free and rejoin the fight. Tematsu tried to spray them again, but his gas canister was already empty. One of the Bud Ones kicked him hard, sending him flying. Matome was confused about why Tematsu had come, but before she could ask, the Bud One's leader attacked again, knocking her down. The leader aimed a sharp object toward her chest, ready to strike, but at the last second, Tematsu threw himself in front of her to protect her. The attack hit him instead. Matome froze in shock, unable to comprehend why he would risk himself like that. The leader tried to go after them again, but Matome managed to escape while carrying the wounded Tematsu away from the scene. Tematsu lay weak in her arms and tried to speak, reminding her of his own words, that she should always follow what sparks her interest. But before he could finish what sounded like a final message, he went completely still. Madame desperately tried to wake him up. Tears fell as she begged him not to die, not for her, not like this. Refusing to accept his death, she gently held him close and pressed her lips against his, channeling a mysterious energy between them. A brilliant light surrounded their bodies, and moments later, something miraculous happened. Feimatsu opened his eyes again, confused and disoriented. Madame felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She explained that she had performed what she called a transcendence operation, something that went beyond fate itself, though it came with side effects. Before they could process what had just happened, more bug ones appeared. One of them, still holding a metal fork, lunged at them. Feimatsu instinctively caught the weapon midair and managed to defeat the attacker in an unusual way by removing parts of the creature's outfit, exposing it to the open air. Everyone watching, including the remaining bug ones, was stunned. Feimatsu realized something: these creatures were sensitive to direct air exposure. That meant the fastest way to neutralize them was to remove their clothes. Acting quickly, he disarmed several of them using this strange yet effective method. But the Bud One's leader attacked again and managed to strike Feimatsu hard enough to knock him off the rooftop and onto the street below. Madame rushed down to reach him. More Bud Ones surrounded them, but Feimatsu fought back, defeating them one by one using the same unconventional strategy. Finally, when the leader lunged toward him, Feimatsu threw a piece of fabric, caught hold of the leader's clothes, and pulled them away in one swift motion, ending the fight. A crowd began to gather, thinking the whole scene was part of a movie shoot. Some even recorded it with their phones. Feimatsu, still catching his breath, accidentally found himself staring at the defeated leader, who was left partially unclothed. Embarrassed, he quickly looked away when he noticed Matoma had caught him doing so. Surprisingly, Madame wasn't angry. She said she was impressed by how effectively he handled the situation. Matoma then introduced herself properly, but Feimatsu chuckled, saying her name reminded him of a mayonnaise brand reviewer. Madame apologized, saying that ever since that moment, Feimatsu would no longer be able to live a normal life. He had seen the hidden side of Akihabara, a side filled with mysteries, and now he was destined to keep fighting alongside her. However, while Madame was speaking seriously, Feimatsu seemed distracted, barely listening to her words. He casually suggested that they go to a clothing store nearby so they could get changed. Madame tried to explain something else, but Feimatsu already understood this was only the beginning of their new battle together. That night, Madame told Feimatsu that the creatures they had been fighting were called the Bud Ones, bloodthirsty monsters that disturbed the peace of Akihabara. Feimatsu couldn't believe the rumors were actually true. Most Bud Ones were low-class types, their bodies possessed by demonic entities known as kurobugs. There were also Hazoku, beings capable of creating higher-class Bud Ones. Madame grew annoyed at Feimatsu's indifference, only to realize he was simply hungry and wanted to buy a katsu sandwich. She explained that the Hazoku were non-human beings able to create Bud Ones, and that she herself was one of them. Some Hazoku lived peacefully alongside humans, just like Matoma, who fought to protect the city of Akihabara. Lately, the Bud Ones had become more active, and Matoma had to keep fighting since her clan had defended the city for over 300 years. Because Feimatsu now possessed special powers, he could no longer leave Akihabara. Madame told him to join her in the fight against the Bud Ones. Feimatsu, however, wasn't interested. He said it all sounded like too much trouble and wondered why they couldn't just ask the police or the citizens for help. As he tried to leave to buy his katsu sandwich, he suddenly hit an invisible wall near the city border. Madame explained that the entire city was surrounded by a strong energy barrier designed to keep the Bud Ones trapped inside. When Feimatsu accepted the fate transcendence from Madame, it meant he had become her subordinate, a high-level Bud One. His hair would glow whenever he released his power. A short while later, Niwaka and Arisa found him, and Niwaka was overjoyed to see that Feimatsu was safe. Madame brought them to her base, an old hobby shop warehouse. Feimatsu couldn't contain his excitement when he saw all the video games inside, while Arisa understood why he was acting that way. She herself was amazed at the number of figures displayed around the room. Soon after, Feimatsu discovered Odyssey, the world's first home video game console. Meanwhile, Niwaka asked Madame whether Feimatsu was no longer human. Just as Madame was about to answer, Professor Tsujin suddenly appeared. He introduced himself with a ridiculously long name, so Feimatsu decided to just call him Professor. Tsujin explained that Feimatsu had actually died, but Matoma had revived him through the Fate Transcendence ritual, turning him into a high-class Bud One under her control. Now, Feimatsu possessed incredible strength, powerful enough to defeat ordinary Bud Ones in a single blow. The professor also explained that high-level Bud Ones created by Hazoku were far stronger than regular ones. Tsujin asked Madame whether the ritual had gone smoothly, knowing how much she disliked performing it. Niwaka finally understood that Feimatsu was no longer human. She remembered their father once saying Feimatsu had failed as a person, and the thought made her sad. Tsujin encouraged Feimatsu not to think negatively, telling him that he was actually fortunate to have evolved into a higher being. Feimatsu then asked what would happen if he removed his clothes, since the enemies he had defeated earlier had turned back to normal after their clothes came off. Madame told him he would find out on his own later. Tamatsu also wondered how he was supposed to take a bath if he couldn't remove his clothes. Tatsujin said the base had a special shower room he had personally built. When Tamatsu pulled open the curtain, to his shock, Orisa was already there, and the situation quickly became awkward. Madame immediately scolded him, embarrassed by the misunderstanding. She reminded Tamatsu that, as her subordinate, the Bud Ones would now target him. That meant he had to fight and join the Community Defense Group, a volunteer team dedicated to protecting Akihabara. Most members were regular citizens who volunteered to help, though some, like Madame, devoted themselves fully to hunting the Bud Ones. Suddenly, Orisa appeared again, calling the whole thing so cool. Madame, flustered, tried to cover her up while keeping the situation under control. Tamatsu decided to stay at the base, realizing he couldn't leave Akihabara anyway. Niwaka was confused as to why he would live there, but Tamatsu explained he couldn't go home and would live with Matoma for now. Madame reluctantly agreed. Niwaka worried their parents would be concerned, but Tamatsu asked her to tell them he had found a lifelong job. Niwaka said their mother might understand, but their father probably wouldn't approve. Madame told Tamatsu to get ready for their next mission, while Orisa cheered excitedly, so much that her towel almost slipped, causing another round of chaos. Tatsujin mentioned that there was still one free room upstairs, and although Madame hesitated about living together with Tamatsu, Tatsujin assured her that Tamatsu, while a bit clueless, was a good person at heart. Madame finally agreed and told Tamatsu he would officially work as part of the Community Defense Group, following her orders from now on. She asked him to clean up the room upstairs and informed everyone that their next mission would begin the next morning at 7. Niwaka could only hope that Tamatsu would be alright. The next morning, Madame walked together with Tamatsu and Orisa. Madame was puzzled about why Orisa was tagging along with them. Orisa explained that she had joined the public welfare group, which made Madame wonder who had even allowed her to join. Orisa asked Matome not to be so stubborn, saying she already knew that Madame was the one who repaired the damaged figurines. Madame admitted that she felt bad for the shop. She'd also apologized to Orisa because the day before she had mistaken her for one of the Bud Ones and attacked her right away. Suddenly, Orisa hugged Matome tightly and said she wanted to be her teammate. Out of nowhere, Tamatsu announced that he had already decided on a name for their team. In fact, he had thought of it since yesterday. Matome immediately disagreed, saying the name sounded awful, but Tamatsu insisted that it was a combination of all their names. Even so, Madame firmly refused. A moment later, members of the Akihabara Public Safety Group arrived. They wanted to ask about the violent incidents that had occurred around Akihabara the day before, especially since there was information suggesting that Madame and Tamatsu had been involved. They were also curious about why Tamatsu was always seen with Matomo. Maybe he was part of the organization too. Tamatsu explained that he and Matome were part of a team called Electric Mayonnaise. Orisa quickly pointed out that her name wasn't included in that team name, so Tamatsu decided to change it to Electric Mayonnaise and Friends. Madame got angry and hit him repeatedly, refusing to accept such a ridiculous name. Hinjiro didn't care much about what the team was called, but he found it strange that members of a public organization were the ones causing incidents. Shohei scolded them for stirring up trouble in Akihabara, a place that already had an unspoken rule about maintaining order. Madame urged Tamatsu to leave right away, but before going, Tamatsu told them not to underestimate their team. Orisa acted cheerfully and told them not to worry too much about it. Later that day, Madame and the others went to a cafe to talk about the Bud Ones incident. Tamatsu was confused because online news reports claimed that a cosplayer had gone berserk instead. Madame explained that their enemies had used something called Kurobug to create many allies. She believed that they were trying to take control of Akihabara and that their organization was known as Metronica. Madame was convinced that their main base had to be somewhere within the district. Tamatsu pointed out that it would be pointless to fight the enemy without knowing their exact location. Madame said she didn't care, she just wanted to protect the city. Orisa agreed, saying she also wanted to defend this place full of amazing things. Tamatsu, however, couldn't help but think about shopping while he was still in Akihabara. Instead of that, he had been patrolling since morning, and since none of them were being paid, he wondered how they were supposed to survive like this. It turned out that Tatsujin's Research Institute had been providing them with some funding, but it wasn't enough to cover the rent for their base. When Tamatsu asked how they were supposed to make a living, Madame told him he should find a part-time job. Not long after, Momo appeared and approached Tamatsu. Momo was a well-known freelance waitress famous for her legendary service. Orisa was thrilled to meet her in person. Momo then suggested a good place where Tamatsu could find a side job. They soon visited the Mashiro agency, where Tamatsu asked for an easy job that paid well. The agency handed him a flyer, but both Madame and Orisa didn't trust it. The agency staff said they weren't responsible for any of the information on it. Madame commented that most of the sensors Tatsujin had made were basically useless anyway. Tamatsu decided he should head to the Eshigoya Tokyo Military Goods Store, which was looking for part-time employees. When they arrived, the place was packed with people. It seemed like military-themed items were really popular at the moment. Orisa mentioned that thanks to certain admirals and tank girls, the military theme was always trending. Tenmatsu, however, thought it was just a bunch of low-level fans looking for the latest model kits. Orisa teased him, saying he was also a hardcore military otaku himself. Suddenly, Tenchao appeared and said that he didn't have any valuable goods to sell to those customers. He fired his weapon into the air, leaving Tenmatsu completely confused about what was going on. Out of nowhere, ghostly military spirits appeared, capturing and possessing the visitors in the store. The sensor device detected an intense reaction from Tenchao. It turned out that he was actually the leader of the military-type Bud Ones. Matome declared that Tenchao was a high-class Bud One and urged Tenmatsu to fight alongside her. Orisa, full of excitement, joined the battle too. Together, they managed to defeat many of the Bud Ones. But Tenchao ordered his soldiers to take down Matome and her team. Chaos erupted, and people started fleeing the building in panic. Meanwhile, Masato was on a nearby rooftop with Fukame recording everything that was happening below. Meanwhile, a squad of Bud One's soldiers opened fire on Tenmatsu and his friends. Orisa quickly jumped toward the soldiers and kicked one of them, even managing to snatch his weapon. Matome was surprised that Orisa could pull that off. The three of them moved forward to attack Tenchao. Tenchao soon realized that Tenmatsu and Matome were immune to his soldiers' regular weapons, so he ordered his troops to switch to special ammunition. The next volley tore through Tenmatsu's and Matome's clothes, and Tenmatsu felt his body burning from the strange effect. It turned out those bullets were designed to shred clothing. Matome told Tenmatsu to fall back. The three of them quickly jumped out of the store. Not long after, Tsurubashi and his group arrived, accusing them of causing trouble. Shohei refused to let smugglers like them run wild, saying it could damage the reputation of the Chuodore community. Suddenly, several grenades were thrown from the store, forcing everyone to run for cover as explosions shook the area. Tsurubashi was confused about what kind of forces were stationed above the store. Matome explained that the attackers were Bud Ones. Kozakura thought it was just a myth, but Matome insisted that Akihabara was in danger and that they had to protect it. Orisa added that Matome's team was also defending Akihabara, just like Chuodori. She then hugged Tsurubashi and asked him to be friendly, since they were all members of the same community. Tenmatsu urged Orisa to leave, but Tsurubashi suddenly agreed to help. Although his teammates were hesitant, Tsurubashi reminded them that even if they didn't believe in the Bud Ones, keeping Akihabara peaceful was still their duty. Orisa was thrilled, while Tenmatsu thought the more people they had, the more exciting things would get, especially since he already had a plan for the next battle. Orisa was full of energy and ready to fight alongside them. When they reached the front of the store, Orisa kicked down the line of guarding soldiers. Matome was amazed since she was used to fighting alone. As soon as they entered, they started facing the Bud One's soldiers head-on, returning fire while Matome swung her baseball bat to take them down. Matome asked Tenmatsu to deal with the store manager, Tenchao, while she handled the Kurobug soldiers. Tenmatsu asked why Tenchao was doing all this. Tenchao replied that he had no use for unfaithful, trend-chasing people, claiming his store was meant only for experienced elites. He said most of those wannaves would become his pawns in taking over Akihabara. Tenmatsu told him he should treat newcomers better, reminding him that he probably once thought every Japanese fighter plane was called Type 0. Embarrassed, Tenchao tried to deny it and opened fire on Tenmatsu, but Tenmatsu quickly used his clothes for protection, leaped at Tenchao, and pulled off his outfit, ending the fight in an instant. It turned out Tenmatsu then borrowed the clothes from Tsurubashi for protection. However, once he removed Tenchao's outfit, Tenmatsu suddenly vanished. Matome realized that people possessed by the Kurobug would return to normal humans once their clothes were removed, but high-ranking Bud Ones and Hazoku would disappear entirely when that happened. Matome apologized for what had happened, but Tenmatsu's spirit remained high. He said he needed to enjoy life while he could and wanted to buy lots of things so he wouldn't have any regrets. He even decided to look for a job to earn money, rushing off to an agency office. Matome was baffled by Tenmatsu's reckless enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Orisa had successfully gathered and cared for the victims who had turned back into normal humans. News outlets soon reported that the chaos in Akihabara was a clash between otaku factions. The report was aired by Masato on his channel. After finishing the broadcast, Masato admitted that the story felt a bit exaggerated, but it was actually Fukame who had ordered him to present it that way. Fukame couldn't believe that a high-ranking Matronica member had been defeated so easily, and she began preparing her next plan. That day, Niwaka was watching Ayo's concert performance on TV. Tenmatsu, sitting nearby, didn't seem to recognize the idol at all. Orisa then explained that Ayo was a popular Akihabara idol who used to be the lead singer for GNZ34. She gained her fame thanks to her sweet stage presence and her cool, composed attitude during fan handshake events. The moment Tenmatsu laid eyes on Ayo, he immediately fell for her charm and became one of her biggest fans. He even went to see her concert in person. When he came back home after the concert, Niwaka was shocked by how Famitsu looked, though Orisa actually liked his new appearance. Matome, on the other hand, scolded him because he was supposed to be on patrol with her that day. Famitsu apologized for skipping out on their duty. Even though it was already late at night, Matome still invited Famitsu to patrol with her, but he refused, saying he wanted to watch the concert review broadcast. For him, the most important thing was to experience Io's performance live and then join the fan discussions afterward. Famitsu admitted that the concert had been absolutely incredible. Frustrated, Matome stormed off. That night, Matome went to a burger shop and ended up eating a huge amount of burgers. She was still upset and thought that while she was sitting there doing nothing, their enemies might already be moving forward with their plans. She began to regret saving Famitsu that one time. Her face turned red when she remembered the kiss they had shared. Meanwhile, Famitsu was at a cafe listening to music when Cage showed up. Cage couldn't believe Famitsu had suddenly gotten into idol music. He suggested Famitsu should try listening to higher quality tracks and offered him his own earphones to test. After trying them, Famitsu became obsessed with finding the best audio gear possible. He went to a store and was shocked by how expensive the headphones were. The shop clerk told him they weren't just headphones, they were ear speakers. In the end, Famitsu bought the ear speakers. But it turned out that everything had been part of a plan by Cage and the shop owner to make him buy their products. Sure enough, Famitsu ended up buying a ton of equipment, high-end speakers, the latest audio tech, limited edition vinyl records, record players, pure gold audio cables, and even a mysterious stone said to boost sound quality when placed on the player because it enhanced sound waves with special particles. Later, Famitsu proudly told his friends that after chasing the true essence of audio, he had discovered a simple truth. Idol music is best enjoyed live. His friends couldn't believe it, especially since he had spent so much money on audio equipment. But Famitsu explained that nothing could match the energy at a live concert, the unity, the passion, the way everyone's focus comes together for one person. That, he said, was what being a true idol fan was all about. However, when he got home from the concert, he found a huge credit card bill waiting for him. With no other choice, Famitsu went to an agency to look for part-time work. When asked what kind of job he wanted, he said anything would do, as long as it paid well and the money came fast. The agency gave him a job that seemed perfect for his situation. Meanwhile, Matome was frustrated that Famitsu had completely abandoned electric mayonnaise, first for an idol obsession and now for a part-time job. Niwaka explained that her brother tended to forget everything else whenever he got fixated on something. Matome apologized to Niwaka for making her take Famitsu's place on patrol. Orisa, however, said she understood why Famitsu liked idols. To her, idols represented dreams and everyone adored them. She even admitted that she wanted to chase the world of idols herself. Suddenly, a woman stopped them and asked if any of them wanted to become idols. The three of them screamed in surprise. The woman invited them to talk in a cafe. She introduced herself as Chibusa from Great Emperor Records. Iwaka and Matome didn't recognize her, but Orisa immediately knew who she was. Orisa explained that Chibusa was a major figure in the idol industry, famous for her captivating performances and for producing hit dramas inspired by her own experiences, often touching on the darker sides of the entertainment world. One of her shows, Why They Don't Pay, had been a huge success. Chibusa was a legendary media producer and she seemed impressed that Orisa knew so much about her. Chibusa was accompanied by Muramura, her personal photographer. She told the three girls that she saw untapped potential in them, like diamonds waiting to be polished, and she believed they could be the next big idol trio to shine in the future. She asked if they were interested in debuting as idols. Niwaka was confused by how sudden the offer was, and Matome immediately declined, saying the three of them had an important mission to focus on and couldn't waste time chasing fame. But before they could continue, Orisa quickly covered their mouths and excitedly accepted the offer. She was confident that the three of them could become Akihabara's next big stars. And just like that, Chibusa decided to make them idols. During a training session, Matome used the stage name Ma, Niwaka went by Ne, and Orisa kept her real name as her stage name. Together, the three formed an idol trio called Manias. Chibusa reminded them to maintain their stamina because, according to her, an idol could never succeed without a healthy body. They started doing physical exercises, beginning with jump rope practice while Famitsu was busy with his own job. After that, the trio moved on to practicing fan handshakes, where they had to keep smiling no matter what. At the same time, Famitsu was cleaning windows on a tall building. Next, Matome and her friends practiced climbing walls. Matome questioned whether rock climbing was really necessary to become an idol. Orisa admitted she didn't know either, but she believed it might be part of the new idol standards at the time. Still, Orisa gave it her best effort, full of energy, while Muramura kept recording their activities. Meanwhile, Famitsu continued his delivery job around town. Later on, Madame and her team had a photo shoot. Many photographers surrounded them, taking countless pictures as the trio tried to pose in cute and cheerful ways. They were a bit embarrassed when people started taking pictures from lower angles. Meanwhile, Feimatsu was still busy arranging flower bouquets at his workplace. The next day, the three girls were filmed eating snacks for a promotional video. The scene's direction felt awkward and overly suggestive, and they didn't really understand why they had to pose in such a way. Muramura explained that it was supposed to be an image video to showcase the group's charm. That same day, Feimatsu visited an agency again to look for a better-paying job. The agency offered him a cleaning job at another building and hinted that he might discover something special while working there. At the same time, Madame and her friends were told to prepare for a photo shoot wearing swimsuits. Inside the dressing room, they spent some time choosing outfits. Madame hesitated and said she didn't feel comfortable wearing a swimsuit. Arisa scolded her, asking her to stay committed since they had already come this far. Madame clarified that it wasn't about being unwilling, she just didn't want to reveal too much of herself. Niwaka immediately understood and supported her. Madame explained again that she simply couldn't expose too much skin, so Arisa decided to help by finding a more modest swimsuit for her. Arisa confidently wore a bright, stylish swimsuit. Niwaka chose a frilly one, and she also added stockings and gloves to cover more of her skin. Once everyone was ready, Muramura told them to begin shooting. Niwaka noticed a few older men nearby and quietly asked who they were. Muramura assured them not to worry, saying that those men were just part of the production crew in charge of the water effects. Niwaka nervously imagined them spraying water during the shoot. As filming began, Niwaka showed her cutest smile. Matome still looked serious and a bit stiff, so Muramura asked her to relax and smile more. Arisa, on the other hand, was full of confidence and energy, giving expressive and lively poses in front of the camera. Then, Muramura requested a few more creative poses. Arisa tried striking some confident and dramatic ones, clearly enjoying the moment. However, when Muramura suggested she make her outfit a little more revealing for artistic purposes, Madame and Niwaka immediately stopped her. They both said that their request was completely inappropriate and crossed the line. Madame firmly told Arisa not to do anything she might regret. Arisa suddenly realized that if she went along with that, it could ruin her career in the long run. Muramura complained that they were interrupting the shoot and ruining the best part. Chibusa then stepped in and repeated that idols could only succeed with good physical appeal. Niwaka was surprised, saying Chibusa had never mentioned anything like that before. Matome angrily responded that this was nothing more than a trick to lure people into something shady. In the end, Madame decided to stop the shoot and urge her friends to leave the set together. Muramura said that doing something like that definitely wasn't a good choice. Chibusa even warned that she would use her power if the three of them insisted on ignoring her words. Then Chibusa and Muramura revealed who they really were. They were Bud Ones, planning to take control of Akihabara by using a shocking revelation about an idol as their puppet. Arisa was stunned. It all started to make sense since she had already felt something strange from the beginning. Chibusa actually wanted the three of them to keep chasing their dream of becoming idols, but things had gone far from what she originally hoped for. She ordered her subordinates to attack them, and the Bud Ones immediately launched their assault. Matome and Arisa, however, easily threw the Bud Ones into the swimming pool. Since Niwaka couldn't fight, Matome told her to run away. Niwaka started running, but she tripped, and the Bud Ones began closing in. Terrified, Niwaka screamed for help. A few men nearby tried to block the Bud Ones to protect her, but they were too weak and were quickly defeated. The Bud Ones moved closer to Niwaka. In panic, she shouted for her older brother at the top of her voice. In an instant, the Bud Ones were wiped out. Feimatsu had arrived just in time to save her. Niwaka couldn't believe her brother was really there. Feimatsu quickly checked to make sure she was okay. Chibusa then approached and demanded to know who Feimatsu really was. Feimatsu replied that he was just a part-time janitor who cleaned up trouble, and that included people like them. Madame told him to stop acting cool and just help them out. Arisa jumped in to attack Muramura, but Muramura's counter hit sent her flying back. Meanwhile, Feimatsu used his broom handle to face off against the Bud Ones. Muramura kept attacking Matome, but Matome skillfully dodged every blow. She told Feimatsu that Muramura was their commander and that he needed to take him down. After clearing out the Bud Ones, Feimatsu turned his attention to Chibusa, but defeating her wasn't easy. Chibusa was strong and incredibly fast. She even used a rapid strike technique that shattered the broom handle in Feimatsu's hands. Not long after, Feimatsu managed to grab the edge of Chibusa's outfit, weakening her control. At the same time, Muramura forcefully pulled at Arisa's costume, causing her to fall and hurriedly cover herself. Madame realized then that both Chibusa and Muramura were high-level Bud Ones. She was fighting Muramura alone, and her outfit was torn during the struggle. Feimatsu, worried about her, tried to run to her side, but the Bud ones blocked his way. He managed to push through them easily, thanks to his experience squeezing through crowds at idol concerts, and caught Muramura's arm. Muramura pulled away and the two started battling head-on. Feimatsu went for Muramura's outfit again using his signature spinning move, a wild, powerful technique that sent Muramura and the other Bug ones flying. The impact caused Muramura's outfit to come off and he fell into the pool before vanishing. Niwaka, Orisa, and Madama cheered with relief, happy that Feimatsu had managed to defeat Muramura. Shortly after, Chibusa regained her senses, returning to normal and having no idea what she had done. Madama then explained everything to her. Chibusa apologized for all the trouble she had caused. Madama assured her that it wasn't her fault, the Bug ones had been controlling her actions. Chibusa admitted she didn't remember much about what had happened under their control, but she did recognize real talent in the three of them. As an apology, she offered to become their producer. Madame and Niwaka were shocked, while Orisa couldn't believe such an opportunity was suddenly right in front of her. The next day, the three of them performed on stage. They sang and danced with full energy. Their performance was truly impressive. Their natural talent shone through. By the time the song ended, they were all out of breath. Only 6 people showed up to their concert, but everyone clapped enthusiastically. Feimatsu gave them a thumbs up, showing how much he enjoyed it. Orisa was surprised that their first concert had such a small audience. It had been arranged so suddenly that they hadn't had time to promote it properly. Still, Madame didn't seem bothered at all. She smiled, seeing how happy Feimatsu was with their performance. One day, Feimatsu set up a beam antenna on a tower so he could pick up broadcasts from both Hokkaido and Okinawa. Madame asked Niwaka what Feimatsu was doing, and Niwaka explained that he was installing an antenna for amateur radio. Feimatsu had been into radios ever since grade school, and after spending so much time around the shops in Akihabara, it seemed like his old enthusiasm had come back. Madame wondered if they really needed an antenna that big. Tatsujin, however, seemed excited about it. The weather was perfect, and she wanted to tune in to different frequencies. As Tatsujin adjusted the dial, the antenna suddenly spun around and hit Feimatsu on the head. He lost his balance, but luckily, the safety rope caught him before he fell. Feimatsu scolded Tatsujin for being careless, and she quickly apologized. Later that day, Feimatsu went to a store while staying in touch with Orisa over the radio. At that moment, Orisa was watching their target and waiting for Feimatsu's signal. Niwaka, who was standing near the stairs, asked if Orisa had found anything good. Feimatsu told Orisa to stay put so he could double-check first, but Orisa insisted they move fast before losing the item. Feimatsu told her not to rush, but Orisa didn't want to wait any longer. She went ahead and grabbed it, an extremely rare item for a bargain price. Orisa was thrilled with her find, but Feimatsu scolded her again after discovering another store selling it for 120 yen less. Niwaka asked Feimatsu to lower his voice before he drew attention to them. Madame couldn't understand why they were using radio communication when they were all standing so close together. It turned out that in the city their transmitters only worked within a 30-meter radius. Afterward, Feimatsu and his friends went to Fuji Radio Electronics, where he planned to upgrade their communication system. The store had everything. Legendary models like the True to 830, Yaejisu GT 101Z, FGDX 9000, and many others. Madame and the others couldn't believe how excited Feimatsu was while picking out radios. He was especially thrilled when he found a vacuum tube amp, the Yaejisu SL 2,100,572B, with automatic tuning and digital signal features. He even started dancing with it in his arms out of pure joy. A moment later, Niwaka picked up an air traffic broadcast. She was shocked, wondering if it was some kind of classified transmission and whether they were even allowed to listen to it. Orisa casually said that listening for fun wasn't really a problem. Soon after, Feimatsu discovered a new device that could send pictures digitally and connect through VoIP. Madame couldn't understand why they needed a transceiver when they already had smartphones. Feimatsu explained that radio waves behaved differently each day and they needed to sharpen their skills, technology, and creativity to catch them accurately. Amateur radio, he said, brought back a sense of adventure and curiosity that modern people had forgotten. It could connect people all around the world, anytime and anywhere. To Feimatsu, simple radio waves created a kind of joy that smartphones never could. Smartphones were convenient, sure, but they only worked within the digital spaces created by corporations. Depending too much on them, he said, meant people might lose their ability to think independently. Feimatsu even covered his smartphone with a small plastic casing as if to make a point. Suddenly, a deafening sound wave burst through the air. Every smartphone and computer around them exploded at once. A massive tower had appeared, blasting out shockwaves powerful enough to blow up electronic devices across nearby buildings. Madame was stunned. She didn't remember ever seeing a tower that huge before. It looked just like Tokyo Tower. Orisa pointed out that it might actually be the legendary Akihabara Tower. Then a voice echoed from above. A girl standing at the top of the tower declared that this was indeed the legendary Akihabara Tower, also known as Tokyo Tower 2. She announced that she and her followers would reclaim the dreams that had been taken from them by the Sumida Ward. Famitsu and the others were shocked when they realized the whole thing was the work of the Bug Ones. The girl's name was Denko. Denko explained that the Bug Ones' special radio waves transmitted from the tower had destroyed all communication devices. The tower's signal was stronger than any ordinary radio tower. It was going to be the most powerful broadcast tower in all of Japan. Hearing that, Famitsu and his friends knew they couldn't just stand by. They rushed toward the tower to stop her. Denko immediately unleashed a powerful microwave burst. The blast caused Famitsu, Madame, and Arisa's clothes to spark and burn slightly from the heat. They quickly retreated, feeling the intense sting across their bodies. Denko laughed as they ran, sending another wave of energy their way. Realizing they were at a disadvantage, Famitsu and the group decided to fall back to their base. The attack's strength was so intense that it even scorched several nearby buildings as they escaped. At their head-out, Niwaka was treating Famitsu, Madame, and Arisa. Tatsujin mentioned that dealing with enemies who use microwave waves was proving to be quite troublesome. At that time, Akihabara was in chaos. Smartphones and computers were exploding because of the strange waves. According to Famitsu, the only way to stop the signal might be to destroy the tower, but they couldn't even get close to it. Arisa recalled what Denko had said earlier, that the tower was called Tokyo Tower 2, and that it was also connected to the idea of taking back their dreams. If that was the case, Tatsujin decided to reach out to her mentor in Tsukuba for help. It turned out that Famitsu had once been a researcher at a cutting-edge science center in Tsukuba. Arisa was surprised and said Tatsujin sounded like an elite. Famitsu then asked how Tatsujin had known about the existence of the Bug Ones in Akihabara, and Tatsujin began to tell her story. A few years ago, before the Tsukuba Express even started operating, the Tsukuba Science Center was home to researchers from all over the world. Even though the Bug Ones hadn't become active yet, the researchers already knew that there were Bug Ones hiding behind the scenes in Akihabara. Tatsujin had been working with Denko, the owner of the tower, to study them. They were guided and supported by their teacher, Professor Yagyuta, who was the lead researcher among all the scientists, including those studying paranormal phenomena. He was the one who recommended that Denko and Tatsujin go to Akihabara to study the Bug Ones in their natural environment. Arisa was deeply moved after hearing about Tatsujin's past. Famitsu then asked how Tokyo Tower 2 even came to exist. Tatsujin explained that during their research, she and Denko discovered that the Bug Ones emitted faint but unusual radio waves. Because of that, they decided to pursue a special project. About 10 years ago, there had been plans to build a replacement for Tokyo Tower 2, in Akihabara. With a large enough antenna, they could easily detect and analyze those faint radio signals. Denko and Professor Yagyuta had poured all their wealth into trying to bring the tower to Akihabara. Tatsujin explained that Professor Yagyuta had deep knowledge about radio waves and would probably have a solution for their current problem. Unfortunately, after losing all of his personal fortune, the professor left for Brazil and started working as a prospector in the Amazon to raise money for his research. Madame and the others were shocked to hear that. So Professor Yagyuta was still somewhere out there beyond Brazil, but because of the tower's interference, they couldn't send text messages or emails. That's why they needed an alternative method of communication. Famitsu suggested contacting Professor Yagyuta through radio waves since radio signals could be hacked and were much more reliable. Tatsujin agreed. That was exactly why she had asked Famitsu to set up the antenna. Madame wondered aloud if it was even possible to reach Brazil with a radio signal since it was on the other side of the planet. But Famitsu was confident they could do it. They started studying radio waves together. Tatsujin explained that communicating with Brazil wouldn't be easy. They had most of the equipment they needed, but the one thing they couldn't control was the weather in the ionosphere. She even joked that if praying could control the sun, she would be praying all day long. Surprisingly, Arisa offered to pray to the gods for help, though Famitsu doubted any god would listen to her prayer. They decided to wait patiently for the right wind conditions. Once everything was ready, they would send the radio signal to Brazil. As they all knew, radio waves travel straight and can't directly reach the other side of the Earth, so they would have to use the ionosphere above the sky. The ionosphere reflects radio waves in the same way a mirror reflects light, creating a chain of reflections that can carry the signal to the other side of the world. However, South America was very far away, and voice communication would be unrealistic. They would need to use Morse code instead, which could still work under less than ideal conditions. They knew they wouldn't be able to communicate unless Professor Yagyuta himself replied in Morse code. Famitsu sent a signal to check whether the radio waves had reached Professor Yagyuta, but it still didn't work. Tatsujin asked Niwaka to switch the coaxial cable, told Matoma to grab the toolbox, and asked Arisa to check the rotator on the tower. Arisa immediately climbed the tower and prayed to the ionosphere, but even by nightfall, there was still no success. The next morning, Momo showed up bringing pizza pops and garlic chicken. Famitsu and the others woke up and were thrilled to see the food. It turned out that Niwaka had ordered the meat pizza before heading to school. Momo, who worked in a pizza place that month because of a maid program event, looked around and couldn't believe how serious they all seemed. Tamatsu explained that they were carrying out a complex communication mission. Momo realized that the signals from the new tower had been causing trouble all over Akihabara. She asked if any of their devices had been affected. Tasujin said that since they were under the tank, the effects had weakened, and she had also built a protective wall. Momo walked closer to the equipment and pressed the wave transmitter. Suddenly, a response came through from Professor Yagyuta. Tamatsu quickly listened to the Morse code message the professor sent and asked Tasujin to write it down. The code spelled ALMHK. None of them knew what it meant. Tamatsu guessed it might be an acronym, maybe even a way of saying thanks. Tasujin thought the letters might need to be rearranged in a certain pattern. Arisa admitted she didn't understand either and said she'd just finished eating chicken while crushing the aluminum foil that came in. Tasujin's eyes lit up as if she suddenly understood what ALMHK meant. Excited, she ran inside to look for materials but realized she didn't have enough, so she asked Momo to bring her an order of 100 garlic chicken meals. Meanwhile, Denko was laughing joyfully because he had finally taken control of Akihabara's radio waves, fulfilling his long-time dream. He had once watched a tower being built in Narihirabashi, which made him lose his motivation to live. Fortunately, thanks to Matronica, he had managed to build a tower of his own. Not long after, one of his subordinates reported that an unknown shape, something that looked like an ancient alien, was approaching. It turned out to be Tamatsu, Madame, and Arisa, all wearing aluminum foil suits as protective armor. They had come to take down Denko's tower. Denko launched microwave waves toward them, but the attack didn't work. The aluminum armor completely blocked the signal. Denko was shocked to see that. Tamatsu and his team prepared to move in and face him. Tasujin was grateful to Professor Yagyuta, who had given them the answer, Arumahaku, meaning aluminum foil. Aluminum could fully block microwave radiation. At first, Tamatsu doubted that a single sheet of foil would be enough, but they had used a huge amount. Each suit required about 300 millimeters of aluminum foil. They had gone through piles of garlic chicken just to collect enough foil to make the armor. Tasujin was confident that Tamatsu and the others could defeat Denko and his crew. As they got closer, Denko ordered his men to aim for their opponent's eyes, the only spot not covered by armor. When the shots were fired, Tamatsu and the others turned around and walked backward toward the tower. In a quick move, they managed to pull Denko's outfit, and in an instant, the tower collapsed and exploded. Fukame and Masato covered the event, assuming it was just an overly enthusiastic promotional stunt by an antenna shop. Tasujin then approached Denko. It had been a long time since they last met. She asked why he had done all that. Denko explained that 3 days earlier his dream tower had been destroyed, leaving him hopeless. He had wandered across the country and ended up in Akihabara. He even considered ending his life, but Fukame stopped him, asking him to live and promising to help him achieve his dream. When they shook hands, Denko was transformed into one of the bugged ones. By the time he regained his senses, he realized he had been spreading disruptive waves from the tower. Overcome with regret, Denko cried, apologizing for what he had done to the people of Akihabara. Tasujin promised to reach out to some contacts to help clear Denko's name from the incident. Denko cried in Tasujin's arms and she invited him to go out for a drink and talk things over. The next day, Tamatsu hosted a broadcast from Studio Electro Mayo. The special guests that day were the idol trio, Maneus. They chatted about their new song titled Match for 3000. Madelman was curious why they were suddenly hosting a radio show. Tamatsu explained that it was a free promotion for Maneus, and besides, their broadcast reached all the way to Brazil. Meanwhile, Tasujin quietly looked at an old photo of Denko and Professor Yagyuta together. That day, Tamatsu was hanging out at the game center playing a mahjong arcade game. But as the game went on, an image of a woman started to appear, slowly taking off her clothes. Yuaka was shocked and couldn't believe Tamatsu was still playing a game like that. Tamatsu tried to explain that he was only using it as practice for fighting the Bud ones, since, according to him, there might come a time when he'd have to face them in a mahjong match. When the woman in the game started to undress, Tamatsu quickly covered the screen and told Niwaka to go play the crane game instead. Niwaka was grateful when Tamatsu gave her some money, and she got super excited running off to play. As the self-proclaimed ace fighter, Tamatsu swore that he would play any game to victory without letting his opponent win a single round. In reality, though, Tamatsu lost his final mahjong match and decided to switch to another game. The arcade was filled with tons of classic titles, and he found himself drawn to an old favorite, Street Fighter II. He hadn't been very good at fighting games in the past, but by now he figured he should have improved. He started playing, realizing the game was much faster than he remembered. At first, he couldn't recall the special moves, but eventually it came back to him, and he managed to win a round. Suddenly, a kid walked up and joined the game. Tamatsu was surprised that a child would even bother with such an old game. Confident, he assumed he could beat the kid easily, but it turned out the kid was incredibly skilled. Without giving Tematsu a single chance to land a hit, the kid completely crushed him. Tematsu was frustrated, feeling like he'd been wiped out in one-sided fashion, and he ended up blaming the machine. The kid introduced herself as Matsuko and calmly told him that blaming the machine wouldn't make anyone a better player. Then she walked away, leaving Tematsu puzzled. He had the strange feeling that he'd seen her somewhere before. Meanwhile, Niwaka was happily focused on the crane game, and she actually managed to win a full set of Lao's quintuplet plushies. Not long after, Tematsu walked up to her. Niwaka proudly showed off her prize, but suddenly a glass barrier appeared and sliced through the plushie Tematsu was holding. Both of them were shocked, and Niwaka froze in fear. Out of nowhere, a giant mechanical claw reached down from the ceiling and grabbed her, lifting her up into the air. Niwaka screamed for help, and when Tematsu tried to smash the glass to rescue her, he noticed a warning message saying that anyone who hit the machine would be banned from the arcade. Before he could figure out what to do, the ceiling closed up again, taking Niwaka with it. At that moment, Matsuko appeared once more and commented that Tematsu had matured since he didn't break the machine this time. Tematsu, confused and annoyed, had no idea what she was talking about. A few seconds later, Tematsu received a message from an unknown sender saying that his little sister had been taken. Furious, Tematsu turned to confront Matsuko, but she vanished before he could even react. Shortly after, Arisa contacted him and warned that Niwaka was in serious danger. Tematsu rushed back to their base, trying to figure out a plan to save her. That's when another threatening message appeared. The kidnapper demanded that if Tematsu wanted Niwaka back, he would have to enter the massively popular Street Fighter V tournament and win. The kidnapper had already signed him up. Tematsu was shocked. It was clear this whole thing had been planned in advance, with Niwaka taken as leverage. Arisa explained that the Street Fighter V Weiwei Cup Evolution fight would take place the next day in Akihabara. The tournament would feature many famous gamers, and the champion would get to face Matsuko, who was now a well-known pro. Arisa told Tematsu that Matsuko wasn't just famous for her skills. She was also considered one of the most beautiful and brilliant players in the gaming world, having already won tournaments across the globe. That's when Tematsu realized Matsuko was the same girl he'd met at the arcade, and she was the one who had taken Niwaka. The team reviewed footage from Matsuko's recent matches. After watching closely, Madama commented that the moves Matsuko used weren't normal, they weren't human techniques at all. Madama was convinced Matsuko must be a bugged one. Tematsu couldn't believe it. The so-called genius of the gaming world turned out to be someone using bugged one powers. It was incredibly disappointing. Madama asked if Tematsu thought he could really defeat Matsuko. Arisa stepped in, saying he'd have to beat several famous pro gamers first if he wanted to reach her in the tournament. Tematsu admitted he wasn't exactly great at fighting games, but Arisa reminded him that, as Confucius once said, "You'll never know until you try." She encouraged him to give it everything he had. Motivated by her words, Tematsu vowed to do whatever it took to save Niwaka. Tatsujin had already guessed that Tematsu would say that. In fact, Tatsujin had anticipated it and had even built a special training machine to help Tematsu improve his fighting game skills. That afternoon, Tematsu was training by running on Tatsujin's custom-built machine. Madama was confused about how that kind of workout could possibly help with a fighting game. The machine spun too fast, causing Tematsu to lose his balance and fall. The next session was reflex training. Tatsujin used a tennis ball machine, but Arisa was the one swinging the racket. She kept missing, and the tennis balls ended up hitting Tematsu instead. Arisa tried again, confidently believing she could hit the ball this time, but she accidentally struck Tematsu right in the face instead. Next came the endurance training. Tematsu had to hang onto a rope while two sharks swam in the pool below. He couldn't hold on long enough and eventually fell into the water. Then came reaction speed training with a quiz game, pressure resistance training, and exercises to strengthen his body. At one point, he even had to endure simulated heat training by standing near a warm pole. Tematsu looked exhausted and wondered if he was going to collapse, but he refused to give up because he had to save Niwaka by defeating Matsuko. The next morning, Tematsu practiced by trying to crush a watermelon using only his index finger, and he actually did it. Tatsujin proudly announced that Tematsu had mastered the legendary 16 hits per second technique. Fired up and full of confidence, Tematsu was eager to take on Matsuko. That day, the Weiwei Cup Evolution Fight Tournament in Akihabara finally began. Koga served as the host, accompanied by a male commentator. Tematsu appeared calm, certain that he would win the tournament and face Matsuko. Arisa felt that the opponents looked pretty tough, but Tatsujin was sure that after all of Tematsu's training, no ordinary human gamer could beat him. To face Matsuko, Tematsu first had to make it to the finals. The first round began. Koga called up a gamer named Frog Ozma, a representative from the United States, to fight against Tematsu. Arisa and Madhoman cheered loudly, encouraging Tematsu to win. When the match started, Tematsu confidently said that he didn't have time to deal with minor opponents because his real target was Matsuko. However, to everyone's surprise, Frog Ozmo won the match. Tematsu couldn't believe it. He was completely defeated in the very first round. The shock hit him hard. To rescue his kidnapped little sister, Tematsu stayed up all night training for the Weiwei Evolution Fight Tournament. Even though he lost in the first round, he made an incredible comeback in the playoffs and knockout stages. To reach the final, Tematsu defeated Inferno, one of the strongest contenders, earning the right to challenge Matsukao, the genius gamer. When Matsukao and Tematsu finally faced each other, Tematsu declared that he would win this battle to save his sister. Matsukao didn't quite understand what he meant, but she didn't care much about that. What truly interested her was that she could sense something special about Tematsu, something that made her want to play seriously. The final match began. Tematsu's spirit burned brightly, and for a while he held the upper hand against Matsukao. He stayed calm under pressure, executed a perfect combo, and finished with a critical art. Tematsu won the first round, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Orisa and Matoma jumped with excitement, thrilled to see him take the lead. Suddenly, one of the spectators mentioned that Matsuko always used the first round to study her opponent's playstyle. Tatsujin didn't believe it at first. The spectator explained that in every best-of-3 match, Matsukao intentionally lost the first round to analyze her opponent's tactics. After that, she would mentally process the data and create a strategy to win the next rounds. It was said that Matsukao could adapt instantly, almost like her brain evolved into the perfect gaming processor. Tematsu couldn't believe that Matsukao had purposely thrown away the first round. Matsukao calmly stated that as a professional gamer, everything she did was part of her plan to win, and that nothing was wasted. Koga commented that Matsukao was showing incredible pride, and Matsukao herself admitted that Tematsu's skill level was beyond what she had expected. The second round began, and Tematsu was completely overwhelmed by Matsukao's true power. He could only defend for a short while before Matsukao decisively defeated him. The audience roared with excitement at her victory. Matsukao had shown her real strength. She won the round without even using a special move. Koga wondered aloud if the gap in their abilities was too large to overcome, while the commentator added that the greater the distance, the greater the challenge to bridge it. Tematsu realized that Matsukao truly was the strongest gamer. Matsukao, however, insisted that Tematsu's potential was still greater than he realized, but to claim victory, he needed to push himself even further. Suddenly, Matsukao took off her jacket, surprising Tematsu and exciting the entire crowd. Everyone started cheering enthusiastically. Matoma was confused, wondering why Matsukao would remove her clothing in the middle of a match. Orisa explained that it might be a kind of martial arts technique known as the strike of shame, a symbolic gesture meant to unleash one's hidden potential. According to Orisa, this technique had even appeared in history. During the era of the 16 Kingdoms, the legendary mahjong master Lord John Kioi was said to have used it. Later in Japan's Edo period, a shogi player named Lord Mataro supposedly did the same. Rumor had it that this technique was even coded into a computer program that once defeated a human champion named Yedail, despite the fact that mastering it was said to take over 30 years. Orisa admitted that Matsuko was indeed a genius. Matoma, however, was baffled. She couldn't believe that someone she had once thought of as one of the Bud Ones would resort to something so unpredictable. Tematsu was curious and asked if Matsukao didn't feel embarrassed, but Matsukao replied that she no longer carried any sense of shame. All she had left was her determination to win. As the crowd grew louder, the final round began. Tematsu struggled to keep up and couldn't react fast enough to Matsukao's attacks. Her moves were swift and unstoppable, leaving him with almost no openings. When Matsukao prepared to launch her ultimate move, Tematsu narrowly managed to dodge it. He felt cornered, unsure of what else he could possibly do, until he suddenly decided to follow Matsukao's lead and took off his jacket as well. Seeing that, Matoma shouted, warning him not to go that far since it could be dangerous for him. But Tematsu didn't care. He wanted to dedicate his youth to gaming, and he was ready to give it everything he had. Some of the audience even cheered him on. As the tension rose, Matsukao responded by removing her outer shirt too, drawing a collective gasp from the crowd. Both of them now stood in their undershirts, focused completely on the game. The match reached its peak. Every move, every reaction perfectly mirrored the other. Matsukao was thrilled to be fighting such a skilled opponent and confidently declared she would end the game right there. But Tematsu refused to lose. He wanted his own legend to begin that day. He stood upside down, spinning his body using only his hands, shocking Orisa, who realized all his years of training had been for that very moment. With fierce determination, Tematsu pressed the console buttons rapidly, channeling all his energy into one final burst of focus. In that moment, he managed to defeat Matsukao. The impact was so strong that Matsukao stumbled backward from her seat. The crowd erupted into cheers. Nobody could believe that Tematsu had actually beaten the reigning champion. Orisa was equally stunned and proud of his victory. As the excitement settled, Tematsu suddenly realized his body was burning from exhaustion, and the fact that he wasn't wearing much didn't help. Matsukao noticed and kindly offered him her jacket. She admitted that Tematsu's spirit and determination had truly outshone her that day. They shook hands respectfully. Tematsu reminded Matsuko of her promise to return his younger sister, Niwaka, but Matsuko looked puzzled. She had no idea what he was talking about. Just then, Madame quietly lifted Matsuko's hat, revealing her normal hair and showing that she wasn't one of the Bud ones after all. Tematsu was confused, realizing there must be someone else behind all of this. Suddenly, it became clear the announcer was the real Bud one. Without hesitation, Tematsu struck him with a single powerful blow that sent the announcer flying into the sky. With that, Koga stepped in to officially close the Weiwei Evolution Fight Akihabara event. Tematsu immediately rushed to find Niwaka. Together with his friends, he entered the room where hostages had been kept, only to see Niwaka calmly playing a video game. She admitted she couldn't finish it. Tematsu sighed in relief. She was safe. Madame couldn't believe it. After all the chaos they had gone through, Niwaka was just sitting there gaming like nothing happened. Tematsu smiled and offered to help her finish the game. That day, Tematsu was frustrated because his laptop suddenly showed a blue screen for the 10th time, right after the Winmato's OS updated automatically. He started thinking it might be time to get a new computer. With smartphones getting more popular, PCs have become less appealing among young people. Around that same time, new regulations for Akihabara residents had just been announced. The electronics store MoffMap promised to offer shop-built PCs with surprisingly low prices but high specs. The store owner, Barbara, confidently advertised that MoffMap would become a well-known brand across Japan. After seeing the ad on TV, Tematsu immediately decided to head to MoffMap. He was tempted by the deal but also thought it might be boring to have the same setup as everyone else. Suddenly, Cage showed up and suggested that Tematsu should try building his own PC instead. Cage explained that if Tematsu assembled it himself, it would be one of a kind, something truly personal. Tematsu liked the idea but admitted he had never built one before. Cage was surprised, especially since Tematsu was actually pretty skilled with analog machines. So Cage offered to help him out. They started shopping for parts, picking up a CPU and motherboard first. While browsing, they noticed a man walking into the store looking around for certain components. Once he left, Cage quietly pulled out an item from the pile the man had been looking through. It turned out that the guy was known as Jackal, a so-called parts hunter. He had a habit of going from shop to shop, finding good parts, hiding them under piles, and later buying them from whichever store sold them cheapest. Cage told Tematsu that following Jackal around was a clever way to score quality parts at bargain prices. Tematsu jokingly called it stealing Jackal's finds, but Cage laughed and said that when it comes to building PCs, it's all about survival of the fittest. The fastest builder wins. After buying a few more components, the two of them took a break and enjoyed some fish sandwiches. Tematsu thanked Cage, saying he managed to stay under budget thanks to him. Then they headed home, ready to start assembling the PC. When Tematsu finally turned it on, he realized he had forgotten to buy an operating system. He didn't want to use Winmato's again anyway. Just then, Tatsujin offered him a chance to try out a new OS she was developing called Drive AI Latex. Tematsu agreed and began installing it. After the installation finished, a visual of a girl appeared on the monitor and greeted him. Tematsu was amazed to see that the screen could actually talk. Tatsujin explained that it was a voice navigation feature, meaning the system could respond to spoken commands. Tematsu found it hard to believe. Tatsujin confidently said that her technical knowledge was probably among the best in the world. Unsure what to say to the monitor, Tematsu asked what he should do next. Tatsujin suggested giving the AI a name to make it feel more personal. Tematsu thought for a moment and decided to name the virtual girl Pukao. The computer immediately responded, recognizing the name. He then introduced himself, and Pukao identified him as her administrator. Overjoyed, Tematsu began chatting with her non-stop about all sorts of things. Meanwhile, Matome, Niwaka, and Arisa were enjoying a meal together. Niwaka mentioned that Tematsu seemed completely absorbed in talking with Pukao. Arisa laughed and said Tematsu kept asking the computer unnecessary questions, as if he couldn't stop talking to her. Matome shook her head, calling Tematsu foolish for wasting his time with the machine. Arisa teasingly asked if Matome might actually be jealous. Matome denied it, saying she was just frustrated because Akihabara was in danger, yet Tematsu was spending his time chatting instead of helping. She told Tematsu to get back on patrol, but he hesitated, wanting to spend a little more time with Pukao. Matome's face grew stern, and Tematsu finally agreed to go. Before leaving, he said goodbye to Pukao, wishing he could bring her along. As they walked past the shops in Akihabara, Tematsu noticed Pukao's face displayed on the monitor inside a PC store. Matome urged him to keep moving. After finishing their patrol, they returned to their base, and Tematsu quickly called out to Pukao again. He was stunned when he saw that Pukao could now move on her own. Matome had helped upgrade her. Pukao could walk and even follow Tematsu outside. He was thrilled. Tatsujin explained that Pyukao could do more than just walk. She had extendable arms for performing simple tasks and could record Thematsu's daily activities for convenience. Plus, she had a powerful battery that allowed her to operate for long periods of time. Thematsu was overjoyed and gave Pyukao a big, friendly hug. Orisa commented that he was being overly enthusiastic, but Pyukao responded with a gentle hug in return. Madame, however, didn't seem too pleased with the whole scene. The next day, Madame planned to invite Thematsu to go on patrol with her, but when she arrived at their base, Thematsu was nowhere to be found. Orisa told her that Thematsu had already left to patrol with Pyukao. Madame was surprised to hear that. Meanwhile, Thematsu was taking Pyukao to Mansubashi Bridge, then to a vehicle museum, and later to an anime store. He said that the store was a very special place to him since many of his youthful dreams were connected to it. Thematsu invited Pyukao to come inside, but he was shocked to see that the shop displayed a lot of adult comics. Realizing that Pyukao was too young to be in such a place, he quickly let her out instead. After that, Thematsu took Pyukao for a walk around Akihabara. The two of them drew quite a bit of attention since he was walking around with a computer by his side. When they started to get tired, Thematsu brought Pyukao to a cafe. He ordered a drink and asked to borrow a power outlet so he could charge Pyukao's battery. While he was enjoying his drink, people in the cafe couldn't help but stare at Pyukao. Feeling all the glances coming her way, Pyukao became a bit shy. Thematsu thought it was only natural since Pyukao was such a cute computer. Pyukao even blushed a little, almost like a person would when being complimented. Across the street, Orisa and Matome were at another cafe. From the window, Matome looked rather irritated as she watched Thematsu with Pyukao. Orisa asked why they didn't just patrol together with Thematsu, but Matome said it would be more efficient if they split up. Soon after, she urged Orisa to continue their patrol. That night, before Pyukao powered down, she realized just how much Akihabara meant to Thematsu. The following day, Thematsu played games with her, but Pyukao won 108 times in a row. Thematsu began joking that maybe the age of humans being in control was coming to an end. Matome, however, couldn't understand why Thematsu was acting so strangely. Suddenly, Orisa came in to report that something was happening in Akihabara. Robots were attacking the district, and the one responsible was a model known as PC Momomo. Tatsujin immediately asked Pyukao to connect to Klama's TV for more information. The news showed that a PC from Mothmat had somehow transformed into a robot and was causing chaos. There was even footage of the moment it happened. Rumors spread that a virus might have activated a hidden feature inside the Mothmat PCs, though nothing had been confirmed yet. Matome quickly instructed Orisa and Thematsu to visit the store that sold those PCs. They rushed to Mothmat, but the shop was closed. Matome asked Orisa to try breaking the door open, but Orisa couldn't do it. The door was far too strong. Pyukao then offered to unlock it herself. After analyzing the door's locking system, she managed to hack it and open it successfully. As soon as they entered, Barbara suddenly appeared and accused them of being intruders. Thematsu and the others found her behavior oddly exaggerated, almost as if she was trying too hard to act cute. Barbara admitted that she wasn't acting that way by choice and then revealed her true appearance. She confessed that she had been secretly controlling Akihabara using robots disguised as cheap personal computers. Since Thematsu and his friends had uncovered the truth, Barbara declared she couldn't let them go and ordered her forces to attack. Thematsu quickly told Pyukao to stay hidden. The Bud One's forces were defeated rather easily by Thematsu and the others, which made Barbara furious. She went on the attack herself, but Thematsu countered swiftly, managing to tear off her outer disguise. Without it, Barbara transformed into a much larger form. Before disappearing, she pressed a button and mentioned something about a curse of the sheep. When she vanished, only her horns were left behind. None of them understood what that meant. Moments later, Pyukao received new orders from Tatsujin. Tatsujin informed them that multiple robots were gathering on Chuodori, and they needed to check it out right away. Thematsu and the others hurried there. At Chuodori, people were shocked to see computers floating in the air. There were so many of them, and they began combining their components together. The floating machines merged into one enormous PC-shaped robot that looked identical to a regular desktop computer, only massive in size. Inside the robot's monitor, Barbara's image appeared once again. She stated that if everyone could see her on that screen, it meant she was no longer alive. Since her dream of ruling Akihabara had fallen apart, she planned to destroy the district using the giant Mothmat robot. The massive robot attacked Thematsu and his group. Its power was overwhelming, but they managed to dodge its heavy blows. Orisa felt they had no choice but to fight back. She leaped into the air, spun around, and kicked the robot, but released several cables that wrapped tightly around her. The robot slammed her to the ground repeatedly, leaving her bruised and exhausted. The cables held her so firmly that she couldn't break free, and she was thrown aside. Madama then jumped forward, preparing to strike the robot, but suddenly, dozens of spinning discs flew toward her, slicing through her outfit and forcing her to defend herself. As she aimed for the monitor, it flashed a blinding light, and the robot fired a barrage of keyboard keys like projectiles. Madama was overwhelmed and ultimately crushed beneath the massive PC robot's weight. Tematsu was completely terrified when he noticed the power cable connecting the MOFMAP PC robot to the outlet. The MOFMAP robot started attacking him, but he managed to dodge and quickly ran toward the cord. Without wasting any time, he unplugged it, and moments later, the monitor went dark. Suddenly, a warning appeared on the screen, stating that an abnormal shutdown had been detected. To protect personal data and delete inappropriate files, the MOFMAP PC robot would initiate a self-destruction sequence that could cause damage within a 5-kilometer radius. Tematsu, Madame, and Arisa screamed in panic as a 100-second countdown to detonation began. The group was overwhelmed with fear. Hearing this, Pukao disconnected her charging cable and began moving toward the MOFMAP PC robot. Tematsu had no idea what she was planning to do. Then, Pukao pushed her output to maximum and lifted the MOFMAP PC robot into the air. Tematsu shouted for her to stop, but she continued to rise higher, carrying the robot away from Akihabara. Pukao had learned that Akihabara was a precious place for Tematsu. As she ascended far above the ground, the countdown reached 0, and the MOFMAP PC robot exploded with immense force. Tematsu cried out her name in despair. After the explosion, Tematsu isolated himself on a rooftop, mourning the loss of Pukao. A little while later, Tatsujin approached him, saying that everyone was worried about him and urging him to come back. Tematsu said that Pukao had always prioritized long-term data storage, so he couldn't understand why she had done something so reckless. Tatsujin explained that it was precisely because of that reason, because she valued what mattered most. Tatsujin said that throughout history, Akihabara had constantly changed. It had once been a black market district in a burned-down city, later becoming an electronics hub, and eventually transforming into a haven for otaku culture. The memories and emotions of countless people had gathered there, turning the city into something like a living database. Tatsujin added that Tematsu loved Akihabara deeply, and perhaps Pukao had protected it because, to her, that love was the most important data of all. Touched by those words, Tematsu began to tear up. Tatsujin told him that as long as he remembered Pukao, she would continue to live within his memories, and that he should treasure that data carefully. Tears rolled down Tematsu's cheeks as he thought back to Pukao, their first meeting, their days patrolling the city together, their strolls through the streets of Akihabara, and finally, the moment she acted to save the city, even at the cost of herself. All of it remained beautifully etched in his memory. That day, Tematsu was trying to take a photo of a collectible figure. He searched for the right shooting angle, experimenting with what he called the Canada perspective, or more precisely, the Oberi-style pose. Unfortunately, he accidentally broke the figure. Tematsu immediately felt terrible about it. Yuaka came in looking sad. It turned out the figure belonged to her. When she saw it shattered, she couldn't hold back her tears. Yuaka scolded Tematsu, explaining that the figure was really special to her and that she had only managed to get it at the very last minute. There was no way to find another one like it. Tematsu apologized right away, telling her that a figure like that could probably still be found at an auction. But Yuaka said it wasn't about how easy or hard it was to replace. Anyone would be upset if someone broke something they really cherished. Instead of really listening, Tematsu got distracted by how good his photos turned out. That made Yuaka even more upset. He told her he had used the Canada perspective, but she didn't care and stormed off. Tematsu couldn't understand why she was that angry. Madame and Arisa both understood Yuaka's reaction. They said it made sense because that figure must have meant a lot to her. Feeling guilty, Tematsu decided to look for the same figure at an auction. Madame wasn't sure Yuaka would forgive him, even if he managed to replace it. Unexpectedly, someone placed a huge bid on the figure. The price was far higher than Tematsu had imagined. He was shocked, especially since he didn't have any money at all at that moment. To fix things, Tematsu went to an agency to look for a short-term job. Koga was surprised to see how eager he was to work. She'd offered him a part-time position at a bar that paid quite well, 1,500 yen an hour. Tematsu immediately became interested in the offer. He then went to the office and had an interview with the CEO on the third floor, a man named Suthamu. When they met, Tematsu said he applied because he was curious about how the bar operated, especially its service style and staff management. He also mentioned that he lived nearby. Suthamu playfully commented that the high pay might be a better reason than service or management. Tematsu smiled, realizing that maybe his motivation for money wasn't entirely right. Suthamu explained that his bar hired almost anyone, except those who were truly unfit for the job. Many people before Famitsu had joined just for the money, but after working there, they discovered that there were more valuable things than pay. He hoped Famitsu would also find what truly mattered while working there. Famitsu was then officially hired. The bar was quite spacious, and all the employees wore maid and butler costumes. Famitsu felt a little embarrassed in his outfit, but the head butler, Jiro, told him it actually suited him well. Famitsu then asked about the heart symbol on their name tags. One of the bar staff, a girl named Kin, explained that the heart was a training mark. Everyone started with 1 heart to show appreciation for joining. Those who earned 3 hearts have proven they could connect not only with themselves but also with their coworkers and customers. Famitsu finally understood, and Kin encouraged him to catch up to them soon. Shortly after, Jiro called everyone to gather and instructed them to recite the 5 service phrases together. Welcome, we're sorry, please wait a moment, thank you for waiting, and have a safe trip home. All the staff repeated after Jiro. Famitsu was caught off guard since he didn't know about this routine. Jiro told him to speak louder, otherwise customers wouldn't hear him. Famitsu apologized, saying it was his first time. Sutham told Jiro not to worry, assuring him that Famitsu would get used to it eventually. Famitsu then noticed that many of the staff looked nervous for some reason. Suddenly, Suthamu shouted out their goal for the day. All the staff eagerly raised their hands, hoping to be chosen. To Famitsu's surprise, Kin even knelt down, sincerely asking to be picked. In the end, Suthamu assigned the task to her, and she gratefully accepted it. Famitsu was completely confused about what was going on. When they arrived back at the headquarters, Madame asked why Famitsu came home so late and whether he had found a new job. Famitsu explained that he had started working at an izakaya, a Japanese-style bar, but it seemed like he had made the wrong choice. Madame reminded him that his job shouldn't interfere with their patrol duties. Famitsu admitted that for now he couldn't join the patrol because he needed to focus on work. Madame grew frustrated, thinking he was just making another excuse to be lazy. Famitsu, feeling exhausted, said he needed to sleep early since he had to get up at dawn the next day. Madame was puzzled by his attitude and reminded him that he should apologize to Niwaka. The next morning, Niwaka held a box containing one of her collectible figures. It turned out that the figure had been a gift from Famitsu. Meanwhile, at the bar where Famitsu worked, the place was packed with customers. Famitsu served the orders with a warm and cheerful smile. As he carried his stack of dirty dishes to the back, Kin approached him and praised him for receiving his first thank you from a customer. Famitsu was surprised, saying that hearing gratitude should be normal. Kin explained that it had taken her quite some time before anyone had ever thanked her like that. She told Famitsu that he truly fit this kind of job. Not long after, Jiro asked Famitsu to take a picture of him with a girl who was celebrating her birthday that day. Instead of using Jiro's phone, Famitsu pulled out his camera, saying that a special moment deserved something special. Jiro laughed and called him the bar's official photographer. Famitsu's face turned red from embarrassment. The birthday girl looked genuinely happy when she saw the photo and thanked Famitsu warmly. Jiro praised Famitsu's impressive talent and gave him a friendly pat on the back, which startled him a little. Famitsu told him that he was exaggerating too much. Before closing time, Suthamu approached Famitsu to compliment his hard work. As a small reward, he added a heart symbol to Famitsu's name badge. Famitsu couldn't believe he had earned it so soon. Suthamu encouraged him to keep doing his best. Kin and Jiro congratulated him, and soon everyone at the bar joined in, celebrating his effort with excitement. That night, Madame noticed Famitsu had already fallen asleep from exhaustion. She didn't expect that he had been working so late into the night. The next day, Famitsu asked his coworkers what they were talking about. Kin explained that every time a customer thanked them, they would receive a thank you bonus, and that day was their weekly payout. Kin joked that their payment was literally made of words of gratitude. When the staff lined up to receive their payments from Suthamu, Famitsu realized that this bar really did have a unique reward system. When it was his turn, Suthamu praised his dedication and effort. Famitsu opened his envelope, only to find several slips of paper with handwritten thank you notes from customers. Kin smiled and said that his first payment was full of appreciation from people he had helped. Confused, Famitsu asked what that meant. Jiro explained that each note represented the gratitude he had earned from the customers he had served. Kin encouraged everyone to give Famitsu another big thank you for breaking the record that day. Meanwhile, Niwaka arrived at the headquarters looking for Famitsu. Manomeng and Arisa invited her to sit and talk. Niwaka admitted that she might have been too harsh on him and wanted to apologize. Madame wondered how Famitsu could ever leave his younger sister behind like that. Niwaka then remembered how in the past they had always done everything together. She also recalled reading something Famitsu had written once, that one of his biggest goals in life was to protect his little sister, who meant the world to him. Suddenly, she said softly that Famitsu had always been hard to understand. At that very moment, Tematsu accidentally dropped a tray of food he was carrying for a customer. Kin quickly came over and Tematsu apologized right away. Kin reminded him that he shouldn't be too scared of making small mistakes, since that would only make it harder for him to collect thank yous. She noticed how anxious he looked, even though he had seemed so bright when he received his first words of appreciation. Tematsu confessed that he didn't really know what his purpose for working there was anymore. He looked confused and uncertain. Kin reassured him that everyone started somewhere, and she believed he would find his reason soon enough, through all the gratitude he would continue to receive. She gently put a hand on his shoulder, telling him that they would keep working together to collect as many thank yous as possible. Moved by her kindness, Tematsu teared up. Jiro and the others came over to encourage him too. Tematsu promised he would stand back up and do his best again. Watching the scene, Suthamu smiled quietly, feeling proud to see Tematsu surrounded by such supportive friends. That day, Koga was surprised to see Tematsu handing out thank you flyers to people on the street. His enthusiasm burned brighter than ever as he carried out his duties, even volunteering to help with the kitchen work. When Jiro brought up Tematsu's schedule, Tematsu cheerfully said he wanted to work every single day. It had been a full week since Tematsu last returned to their base. Madome and Niwaka couldn't figure out what he had been doing all this time. Then suddenly, Orisa burst in, shouting that something serious had happened. She showed them a magazine that had published an article about Tematsu, something that put him in danger. Without wasting a moment, Niwaka, Madome, and Orisa hurried to the bar where Tematsu worked. None of them expected to see how different Tematsu looked when he greeted them. Madame asked Tematsu to quit his job while Orisa said that he was heading down a path with no return. Tematsu replied that the bar was the best workplace he had ever been in, and that his dream there was to collect as many thank yous as possible. The others were confused by what he meant. Niwaka walked up to him and in frustration slapped him hard. She wanted him to wake up and realize what he was doing. She even picked up Madame's staff and hit him lightly, still trying to bring him back to his senses. Tematsu fell to the floor dazed. Niwaka knelt beside him and reminded him that his real dream wasn't working in a bar. It was to write a novel that would sell well, be adapted into a live-action movie that might not go perfectly, but then become an anime hit, leading him to live a happy life doing what he loved. With tears streaming down her face, she asked if he had already given up on the dream he once told her about. Tematsu came to his senses and got up. He admitted that being someone needed but not actually contributing wasn't who he really was. Orisa was overjoyed to see him back to normal, and Madame sighed, saying that only a careless big brother would ever make his little sister cry like that. Soon after, Suthamu appeared. He realized that Tematsu had broken free from the illusion. Tematsu, now angry, accused Suthamu of being inhuman for running a workplace like that. Suthamu laughed, admitting that he hadn't expected to be found out, and indeed, he revealed himself to be one of the bugged ones. Suthamu's plan was to reduce labor costs, offer cheap food, and take control of Akihabara through manipulation. Since Tematsu and his friends had discovered the truth, Suthamu decided he couldn't let them go. He ordered his part-time worker army to attack. Madame stepped forward ready to fight and with lightning speed managed to disarm them all. But nothing happened. Tematsu realized why. Those workers were just regular people whose minds had been brainwashed, so trying to strip away their disguises didn't work. The part-time workers then moved to attack Matome, but Orisa quickly jumped in and dealt with them effortlessly. Tematsu also managed to take down Kin and Jiro. However, in the middle of the chaos, Suthamu grabbed Niwaka and took her hostage. He used a device that linked his outfit to hers, meaning that if Tematsu and the others attacked him, Niwaka would be affected too. Not long after, a full squad of Bud Ones began their assault. They overpowered Orisa and Matome, tearing at their clothes in an attempt to weaken them. Tematsu was also overwhelmed. When he heard Niwaka's desperate cry for help, he gathered every bit of strength he had left and rushed toward her. Suthamu was shocked at Tematsu's determination, but Tematsu skillfully tore through Suthamu's outfit, freeing Niwaka and covering her with what was left of Suthamu's own clothes. Niwaka was safe, and with that, Suthamu's body disintegrated into dust. Tematsu let out a deep breath of relief, glad they could head home before sunset. Matome, Orisa, and Niwaka changed into the maid outfits from the bar. Niwaka apologized to Tematsu for the harsh words she'd said earlier, and Tematsu also apologized for breaking something precious of hers. As a gesture of apology, he handed her a small collectible figure. Deeply moved, Niwaka hugged her brother tightly, saying that the figure he gave her had become something truly precious, and that she would take good care of it. She thanked him with a smile, but the moment Tematsu heard the words, "Thank you," he froze. Traumatized from his recent experiences, he suddenly ran off, shouting for Niwaka not to say those words again. One day, Tematsu went out with Orisa, Madame, and Niwaka to buy a rice cooker. Taimatsu said he was happy because his parents had sent him ingredients like rice, but he hadn't realized that the place they were staying in didn't actually have a rice cooker. Orisa guessed that Madome probably never cooked at all, especially since Taimatsu also knew that Madome ate 5 times more than everyone else. Madame admitted that she was indeed an expert when it came to eating, but she also blamed Taimatsu for never cooking. Taimatsu replied that just because he didn't cook didn't mean he couldn't. Suddenly, Iwaka shouted and told Taimatsu never to cook again. Orisa was convinced that there must be something about Taimatsu's cooking that would make him unnecessarily wasteful. Iwaka explained that once when Taimatsu tried to make curry, he chose his ingredients carefully, mixed his own spices, and then boiled the soup for 3 days and 3 nights. He even separated every grain of rice one by one, which made the whole process take about a week. Orisa then mentioned that she was actually very skilled at making curry. As they continued walking, they passed by a store where a crowd had gathered. They noticed a man walking by with a large stack of boxes balanced on his head. Both Madame and Taimatsu were surprised that someone could carry such a heavy load that way. Then Orisa suddenly said that the man was her teacher. Later, when they reached a shopping mall, Taimatsu asked Orisa if she really knew that person. Madame was also confused since the man hadn't reacted at all when they passed him. Orisa explained that the man was her kung fu master back when she trained martial arts in China. That's when Taimatsu and Matome finally realized that Orisa had actually practiced kung fu, which made sense given how strong she was. Orisa described her kung fu training as extremely tough, but said it was one of the most valuable experiences of her life, especially because all she had done before that was study. 10 years ago, Orisa had graduated from an elite university in the United States, and afterward, she started traveling to find what she truly wanted to do in life. Both Taimatsu and Matome were surprised to learn that Orisa was actually a college graduate. Orisa said she believed she could discover something special if she broadened her horizons, so she traveled around the world to see and learn new things. She perfected her curry recipe in India, learned about English humor in England, and mastered her wild instincts in Africa. Iwaka was amazed to hear that Orisa had been to so many different places. Orisa went on to say that during her travels, she met her master, a man everyone called Shisho. She trained kung fu under him for a full year. Shisho didn't just train her body, he also taught her how to strengthen her mind. He was always there for her during hard times and moments of happiness. After Orisa had mastered kung fu, she decided to go to Japan to study Otaku culture. That was when Taimatsu finally understood why Orisa had come to Japan. He had always thought she was just a strange person who suddenly appeared one day. Iwaka then wondered why Shisho was in Japan at that moment. Orisa explained that Shisho had once mentioned wanting to bring his entire family to Japan. When they arrived at the home goods store, they were surprised to find that there were no rice cookers left on the shelves. The store owner told them that all the rice cookers had been sold out earlier that day. Not long after, they saw a pile of boxes start to move. It turned out to be Shisho, who had bought every single rice cooker in the store. Taimatsu approached him to talk, but Shisho completely ignored him and kept walking. Orisa stepped in front of him and greeted him. A moment later, a woman walked up to Shisho. Taimatsu was briefly captivated by her appearance. Orisa asked who the woman was and whether she knew Shisho. The woman introduced herself as Diva Riza and said she was Shisho's producer. Orisa immediately recognized the name. Diva Riza was known as a mysterious promoter who had suddenly appeared in the world of martial arts. She had quickly gained influence by supporting fighters not only behind the scenes but also by stepping into the ring herself and winning. Madame was curious about what Diva Riza wanted from Shisho. It turned out that Diva Riza was using him as part of her plan to take over Akihabara. Madame was shocked to realize that buying out all those goods was actually part of that plan. Diva Riza had been purchasing items at low prices as a foreign buyer and then reselling them to Japanese customers at full price, intentionally confusing the retail market. Her goal was to dominate Akihabara amid the chaos she created. Taimatsu was extremely annoyed with Diva Riza's attitude, and he was convinced that she must be one of the bugged ones. Diva Riza didn't deny it. She revealed her true hair color, and to everyone's surprise, Shisho had already become a bugged one as well. Diva Riza introduced Shisho as her loyal servant, the one who would even buy her a rice cooker whenever she asked. Orisa was shocked that Shisho could be controlled so easily. Diva Riza claimed that Taimatsu and his friends were just getting in the way of her plans. She ordered Shisho to take care of them. Madame could sense that the Kung Fu master was incredibly strong. Taimatsu prepared to face him, but Orisa stepped forward first, determined to bring Shisho back to his senses. However, since he was already under Diva Riza's control, Shisho immediately attacked her. Orisa was thrown back by Shisho's powerful strike, and Taimatsu caught her before she hit the ground. Shisho then attacked Matome, tossing her into a washing machine. Taimatsu tried hitting Shisho with an oven, but the Kung Fu master easily countered him. Shisho went on to tie up both Niwaka and Thematsu. Just as he was about to hurt Thematsu, Orisa intervened, declaring that she would fight him herself. Both of them were ready to battle when suddenly, a store clerk interrupted, asking them not to fight inside the shop because it would cause trouble for other customers. Realizing they were being a nuisance, everyone apologized and quickly stepped outside. Outside, they continued their conversation. Thematsu realized that they shouldn't inconvenience others if they wanted to maintain peace and order in Akihabara. Orisa, however, didn't want their fight to end so easily. She announced that she had already prepared a perfect place for two skilled martial artists to settle things. Orisa declared that she was opening the Grand Akihabara tournament. Thematsu and the others were completely shocked by her announcement. The next day, the Grand Akihabara tournament began. The huge crowd gathered to watch the matches. The event was hosted by Cage and Masato, who were surprised that someone had managed to organize such a massive tournament in Akihabara. The first fighter was introduced, a Kung Fu world champion from Hunan, China, Shisho. He entered the ring with a fierce and confident aura, styled like a demonic panda. He looked undeniably cool, and the audience cheered loudly for him. Once he reached the center of the ring, Shisho struck an intense pose that sent the crowd into a frenzy. Orisa stepped into the ring and proudly declared that she was the one who brought Shisho to help her seize control of Akihabara. She began criticizing the civic organization that protected the area, claiming they had no legal authority and only operated under unwritten rules. Hearing this, Tsudubashi and his allies were visibly irritated. Orisa was confident that Shisho would win and humiliate the civic organization in front of everyone. Not long after, Orisa appeared as Shisho's opponent. She represented the civic organization and was a member of Electric Mayonnaise. Orisa came with one goal: to defeat Orisa by facing Shisho in battle. She leaped into the ring, still hoping that Shisho could break free from Orisa's control. The crowd soon realized that Orisa was actually Shisho's student, turning the match into a teacher versus student showdown. It was a no-rules fight, and since no one knew what Orisa might be planning behind the scenes, Orisa had to stay alert at all times. Orisa and Shisho clashed, pushing each other back and forth. It seemed that Orisa had the upper hand in strength, but suddenly Shisho grabbed her and threw her toward the ropes. Just as she got close, Orisa struck Orisa on the head with a chair. Thematsu shouted that it was an unfair move, but Orisa didn't care. She tossed the chair at the referee, knocking him out cold. The chair landed near Shisho, and Orisa ordered him to use it against Orisa. Shisho hesitated and shook his head. In response, Orisa threatened him by projecting a video of his family, making it clear she would harm them if he disobeyed. Left with no choice, Shisho followed her orders. He attacked Orisa again, throwing her hard to the ground. Then he climbed up high and jumped, landing with force near her. The crowd cheered even louder, amazed by Shisho's technique. Shisho lifted Orisa and brought her back to the center of the ring, grabbing a kendo stick to strike at her. Orisa managed to dodge and retaliated with several sharp slaps, regaining her spirit and even stepping on Shisho's shoulder to push him back. While Orisa was fighting with all her strength, Orisa suddenly displayed a video showing Matome and Niwaka being held hostage by the Bud Ones. Niwaka cried out for help, calling Thematsu's name. Both Orisa and Thematsu were stunned by the scene, and the crowd gasped. No one expected Orisa to resort to such deceitful tactics. Orisa let her guard down, giving Shisho the chance to throw her to the ground and pin her down. Orisa told Orisa that she should just give up. Things got worse when Shisho tightened his hold, pressing Orisa down with full strength. Orisa felt the pain but swore that she would take her revenge. Meanwhile, Thematsu ran off to take care of something. Shisho then placed Orisa's body on top of a stack of tables. He climbed up high, preparing to leap down. If his attack hit successfully, the match could have ended right there. Not long after, Thematsu drove toward the hostage location. Several Bud Ones tried to block his path, but he pushed through them and kept going. Once he arrived, he immediately rescued Matome and Niwaka. Orisa started to panic as the situation turned against her. Back in the ring, Shisho jumped from above, but Orisa quickly got back on her feet, caught him in midair, and threw him down hard. Both of them fell to the ground, exhausted. Orisa rushed to wake Shisho up and demanded that he finish Orisa off using his sword. Shisho hesitated, and Orisa angrily slapped him. Unexpectedly, Shisho turned against her. He struck Orisa, sending her tumbling backward. He declared that his martial arts never taught him to act in such a cowardly way. It seemed that Shisho had finally broken free from Orisa's control, maybe because of the impact from his earlier fall, or perhaps because of her slap. Either way, he lifted Orisa and threw her aside. Orisa was shocked by what she saw. Shisho told her that their fight wasn't over yet. The two of them then fought again, this time fairly. They exchanged powerful moves, each using their own signature techniques. In the end, Orisa managed to land a solid kick just before Shisho could strike her. He fell to the center of the ring. Arisa then spun around, gathering her energy to unleash her special move, Lovely Final, the end of attack. With one strong punch to his chest, she defeated Shisho, bringing him back to his senses. The referee regained consciousness and declared Arisa the winner. But before she could celebrate, Diva Risa suddenly struck her from behind, knocking her down. Arisa, exhausted from the battle, could barely fight back as Diva Risa continued to attack. Diva Risa was furious that Arisa had ruined her plan to sell her special rice cookers for profit. Just then, Feimatsu appeared and shouted that Akihabara belonged to everyone, and he would never let Diva Risa cause chaos again. He jumped into the ring, ready to fight alongside Arisa. Together, Feimatsu and Arisa confronted Diva Risa head-on. They managed to overwhelm her, forcing her to retreat and admit defeat. After the battle, Shisho apologized to Arisa for all the damage caused to Akihabara. Arisa forgave him, saying she was just glad that his family was safe. Shisho couldn't believe he had been manipulated by Diva Risa and admitted he still had much to learn. He even invited Arisa to train with him sometime. Feimatsu then addressed the audience, declaring that the city would always be protected by their community organization. Arisa promised to keep defending the peace of Akihabara. Finally, Feimatsu and his friends raised their glasses in a cheerful toast to the city's peace, while the crowd cheered loudly, chanting the name of their beloved team, Electric Mayonnaise. Cards have existed since the very beginning of the universe. Legend says that even in ancient times, humans arranged 40 cards into a single deck to face their opponents in fierce battles. The long history of those competitions eventually reached its peak with the ultimate card game known as Battle Creatures. In this world, even the US presidential election, the breakup of idol groups, and the early shipment of anime CDs were decided through Battle Creatures matches. In other words, whoever ruled Battle Creatures ruled the world. And so players everywhere dove headfirst into a sea of turbulent card battles. That day, Arisa was live streaming from her base. She was about to open booster packs from the final Battle Creatures expansion, Evolution of Nerds. When she opened the first pack, she didn't find any rare cards, but she brushed it off, thinking it was just the beginning. She kept opening pack after pack, but not a single rare card showed up. Arisa's face grew tense as she ripped open the rest, hoping luck would finally turn in her favor. When she reached the very last pack, she crossed her fingers and opened it, but again, nothing. A short while later, Feimatsu came back to the base and was shocked to find Arisa lying on the floor as if her energy had completely drained away. Arisa explained everything that had happened. Feimatsu couldn't believe she was that upset over the cards. Arisa sighed, saying it felt like the goddess of cards had abandoned her. Then Feimatsu noticed there was still one unopened pack on the table. When he opened it, a dazzling rare card appeared inside. Arisa gasped. It was the first ultra-legendary card seen in 30 years. She looked at Feimatsu in awe, saying it must be fate, that maybe he was destined to become a true Battle Creatures player. Feimatsu was completely stunned by her words. The next day, Feimatsu sat in a cafe, carefully organizing his deck. He looked unusually serious. Before long, Kage-san walked in and asked if Feimatsu had gotten back into Battle Creatures. Feimatsu admitted he had played before but quit when the game's meta changed drastically a few years back. Curious, he asked if Cage used to play too. Cage grinned and said he once built a deck made entirely of banned cards and even beat every grade school kid in his neighborhood. Suddenly, a commotion broke out nearby. It seemed that members of the Chuodori community organization were arguing. The conflict had started between Miyumu and Tsurubeshi, but Shohei and Hijiri quickly stepped in, asking Tsurubeshi to calm down. Frustrated, Tsurubeshi made a rude comment toward Miyumu, which made her tear up. Seeing that, Shohei told Tsurubeshi he went too far and demanded he apologize. Kozakura, watching the whole thing, couldn't believe how childish the argument had become. Feimatsu and Cage just stood there, observing. Cage shrugged it off, saying fights like that were pretty common among young people. But it turned out they weren't the only group having problems. In another circle, Kanifan's friends were arguing over who got to go to the movies with her. Meanwhile, Tetsuko's friends were fighting over who could hang out with her next. And in yet another group, members of Sacred Angel's team were arguing because of a misunderstanding about who had disrespected Sacred Angel first. Things got so bad that the Chuodori community organization decided to disband altogether. Later, back at the base, Feimatsu told his friends about everything that happened. Madama couldn't believe how ridiculous the reasons behind the fights were. She guessed those people probably weren't very committed to their community activities to begin with. Iwaka chimed in, saying she knew what was happening. It was something called a circle crusher. Madama asked if that was another term for Sakura, but Niwaka clarified that it wasn't. A circle crusher, she explained, is someone, usually a girl, who joins a mostly male group and unintentionally causes conflicts among the members. Feimatsu was baffled and asked where Niwaka even learned that kind of random information. Meanwhile, Arisa opened her laptop to tune into a live stream from Klama's TV. Masato, a host, reported that community groups that had long protected peace in Akihabara were now falling apart. According to him, these disbandments started right after several new girls joined their circles. Circle crushing, he said, came earlier than spring, and the storm is right here in Akihabara. Climax TV promised to keep investigating the issue. Arisa thought that maybe some of the guys were simply not used to being around girls, and even small gestures of attention could make them overly excited or distracted. Madame found it strange that all this was happening at the same time across so many groups. Suddenly, Tsujin popped up from under the table, holding out a flyer. She suspected it might be the cause of all the trouble. The flyer was from something called Princess Company, encouraging community groups to recruit more female members. The message seemed suspicious, especially since it targeted only Akihabara-based organizations. Realizing something wasn't right, Himatsu urged everyone to start investigating. Himatsu, Arisa, and Matoma hurried to the location of Princess Company, only to realize that the building used to be the same bar where Himatsu once worked. When they entered, they were greeted warmly by a group of cheerful girls. Mayumi asked what kind of princess Himatsu was looking for, but Madame immediately said she wanted nothing to do with such a ridiculous business. Arisa jokingly remarked that their little circle was basically a harem, since Himatsu was the only guy among them. Not long after, the director of Princess Company appeared. His name was Iketeru. Himatsu immediately suspected that Iketeru might be one of the bud ones because of his odd hairstyle. But instead of being cautious, Arisa commented that Iketeru was actually quite handsome, and she even added that he made 30 million yen a year. Himatsu disagreed, saying a man's worth shouldn't be measured by his annual income, but by how much of it he's willing to spend on his hobbies. Madame was confused and a little frustrated that her friends were saying such foolish things. She was convinced that Iketeru was indeed a bud one. Iketeru was surprised they had already figured him out. He admitted that he had been using his team of girls to quietly eliminate troublemakers around Akihabara. He hadn't expected Himatsu and his friends to uncover his true identity so easily. Arisa warned that whenever something looked too perfect, there was always a hidden trap behind it. Realizing he'd been exposed, Iketeru ordered his group of girls to attack. However, Himatsu and his friends managed to disarm them swiftly without causing harm. Iketeru laughed, admitting that Electric Mayonnaise really had defeated many bud ones before. No wonder his team couldn't stop them. He then announced that it was time to show them his true power. Madame darted forward gracefully to attack, but to everyone's shock, Iketeru managed to block her staff and damage her outfit, slightly using nothing but a card. Embarrassed, Madame quickly tried to cover herself. Iketeru remarked that Electric Mayonnaise wasn't suited for close combat and that such messy fights lacked elegance. Instead, he proposed that they settle things through a card battle. Surprisingly, Himatsu seemed genuinely interested and accepted the challenge with enthusiasm. The next day, the battle creatures duel began. Iketeru explained that they would play under the animated rules, starting with 2,000 life points each. Himatsu agreed, saying that if they played with 4,000 points, the match might go on for 2 weeks straight. Himatsu asked to go first and said he would draw, but Iketeru reminded him that under the current rules, the first player wasn't allowed to draw a card. So Himatsu placed down Happy Nerd and equipped it with Log Glow Stick, which increased its attack power by 300 points, bringing it up to 400 total. Iketeru smirked, saying that Himatsu's Pure Boy deck was no match for his Promenade deck. Himatsu disagreed, pointing out that they hadn't even started yet. Iketeru drew his card and summoned Bright Eyes, a handsome male creature with 2,500 attack points. When Bright Eyes was summoned, it allowed him to call forth as many girls as he wanted from his deck. Himatsu immediately realized that Iketeru was indeed a top-tier player. Himatsu hesitated, trying to decide his next move. Madama watched the duel with a puzzled look, while Arisa commented that Himatsu had dedicated his life to battle creatures. There was no way he'd ever run away from a fight. Madama questioned why they didn't just attack Iketeru together since they clearly outnumbered him. Arisa was baffled that Madama didn't understand a real duel should always be the last resort. Himatsu then played a magic card called Otaku Dance Team, allowing him to special summon up to 3 Happy Nerds from his deck and deal triple damage to his opponent. Refusing to lose, Iketeru countered with Party Game, a card that forced 2 creatures to fight each other directly. Himatsu activated another card, Convention Staff, together with Sample Book Check, which revealed all of Iketeru's cards on the field. To defend, Iketeru used a support card that boosted his creature's defense power, creating a strong barrier. During his turn, Himatsu's Pure Boy creatures were forced to attack only the shielded card. Himatsu quickly used another magic card, Exploitative Gatch, which allowed him to draw 3 more cards from his deck. Arisa was impressed. She didn't expect Himatsu to pull out such a powerful card, especially since one like that was usually banned in tournaments. Iketeru then activated Flash Magic, giving all of his Promenade-type creatures an extra 500 attack points. Both players began triggering effects that canceled out each other's powers. Arisa said the duel was incredibly intense, but Madama didn't seem interested at all. Arisa was surprised and asked how Madama couldn't feel the excitement, the clash of spirit, strategy, and imagination between 2 skilled players. She told Matoma that she really needed to practice using her imagination more often. Hikateru then activated the second effect of the after-party homecoming card. Matoma wondered aloud, noting that the second effect should have been written clearly on the card, and she questioned why Orisa seemed so surprised when she could obviously read it and know what kind of card it was. Suddenly, Orisa let out a startled cry, feeling embarrassed. Famitsu quickly asked everyone to calm down and not make any noise while the card battle was still going on. Moments later, Hikateru activated another card from his hand, the Bachelor's Killer Outfit. That card had the ability to defeat the Pure Boy card, which meant Famitsu's field was now completely open. Taking advantage of the situation, Hikateru launched a direct attack using Bright Eyes, a card representing a handsome man. The attack was powerful enough to tear through Famitsu's clothes, leaving Orisa worried and hoping he could still hang on. Hikateru believed he had already won, but Famitsu surprised everyone by activating the Express Option card during the attack. This card nullified all incoming attacks, though it reduced his life points to just 100. Hikateru was shocked that Famitsu would sacrifice 400 life points to avoid defeat, but Famitsu explained that he hadn't planned for this situation and still intended to keep fighting. Hikateru, amazed by his determination, asked how Famitsu could keep battling in such a desperate state. Famitsu boldly declared that it was because he was a true Battle Creatures player. Even though he didn't have any cards that could immediately turn the match around, he believed in his deck, a deck that had endured countless matches and victories over time. Then he played the Quiet Unemployed Man card, which had no attack value. Hikateru frowned, wondering what Famitsu was planning to do with such a card. Famitsu followed up by activating a spell card called 30-Year Hermit. When this card took effect, all creatures classified as pure-hearted men on the field switched to defense position, and the opponent could no longer attack any creature under its protection. Hikateru commented that such a strategy seemed fitting for someone like Famitsu, who often acted like a reclusive otaku. Famitsu calmly explained that according to the card lore, a pure man who had lived in solitude for 30 years could become a wizard. Because of the 30-Year Hermit card, the Quiet Unemployed Man then evolved into a new card, the Pureness Wizard, with 3,000 attack points. Meanwhile, Hikateru's Bright Eyes had 2,500 attack points. Even if Famitsu destroyed Hikateru's card, it would only reduce Hikateru's life points by 500, not enough to end the game. However, Famitsu revealed another twist. When Pureness Wizard was on the field, it could nullify all effects currently active and directly attack the opposing player. Furthermore, as long as Pureness Wizard remained in play, the opponent was unable to activate any spell, trap, or creature effects. Because of that, Famitsu launched a direct attack. Hikateru's remaining life points dropped to 0. He felt the impact and found his outfit torn apart, symbolizing his defeat. Matoma was astonished that losing the game could even cause Hikateru's clothes to rip apart, but soon realized it was part of the immersive Battle Creatures system. The crowd erupted in cheers, celebrating Famitsu's victory, although Matoma still couldn't quite grasp the complicated mechanics of the game. Meanwhile, Hoshino and Tsurubashi apologized to each other for their earlier argument that had caused tension between them. Kozakuro reminded everyone that what truly mattered was their shared goal as members of the Chuodori community organization to protect Akihabara. From that moment on, the organization members who had previously been in conflict began to reconcile. Famitsu felt relieved to see everyone working together again. Kage understood the situation and gently remarked that youth was often filled with arguments, but also with the strength to make peace afterward. That day, Madame had planned to ask Famitsu to join her on patrol. However, when she went to wake him up, his bed was empty, which was unusual since he usually slept in at that hour. It turned out Famitsu had gone out to meet an old friend he hadn't seen in a long time, and Orisa volunteered to take his place for patrol duty. Meanwhile, Famitsu was sitting at a cafe with his old friend. He commented on how much his friend's appearance had changed since back then. The guy used to always wear black. His old friend laughed and said Famitsu also looked more mature now. Suddenly, Famitsu's vision blurred for a second when he glanced at the person sitting next to his friend. He started to wonder if it might be the work of the Bud Ones. Curious, Famitsu asked who the person beside his friend was. His friend explained that she was his girlfriend, someone he met at work, and her name was Ubuum. Famitsu was shocked. He couldn't believe his old friend actually had a girlfriend. On his way back to their base, Famitsu still couldn't get over it. His old friend had always been even more antisocial than he was, so how did he manage to get a girlfriend? Maybe Famitsu thought his friend had turned over a new leaf when he started college. Orisa, Niwaka, and Madama were puzzled to see Famitsu acting so downcast, especially since earlier he had been so excited to meet his friend. Niwaka wondered what could have happened, but Madama guessed it was probably something silly like always. Famitsu, irritated, snapped at her and explained the situation. His friend had gotten a girlfriend before him, and it really bothered him. Niwaka figured Famitsu must have felt hurt to see his friend find love first. Matoma then teasingly said that unfortunately, none of them, Orisa, Niwaka, or herself, or ever going to be his girlfriend. Tematsu admitted she was right and said he wished a girl would just fall from the sky for him, preferably one who came with a cool robot. Madame rolled her eyes and told him that was impossible. She asked him to join her on patrol, but Tematsu refused, saying he wouldn't go on patrol again until he had a girlfriend. Madame couldn't understand what having a girlfriend had to do with going on patrol. Tematsu said he was jealous. His friend had found love and was living his best life, while he was stuck in a short, drama-free routine, spending his days dealing with bud ones from a warehouse in Akihabara. He admitted he just wanted to experience a date with a sweet and honest girl at least once in his life. Niwaka felt sorry for him and said she would be willing to be his girlfriend and go on a date with him. But Tematsu quickly turned her down, reminding her that would be considered incest. Arisa then offered to go on a date with him instead, and Niwaka supported the idea, saying that Madame couldn't possibly date Tematsu, especially since she didn't seem to like him that way. Madame immediately denied it and boldly invited Tematsu on a date. Arisa chimed in, saying it could just be practice before Tematsu got a real girlfriend. Tematsu didn't mind that idea, so Madame, with her face slightly red, clarified that yes, it would only be a practice date, because she definitely didn't want to be his girlfriend for real. Niwaka and Arisa exchanged mischievous smiles, thrilled that their teasing had worked. Madame, flustered, told Tematsu they should get going and start their date while on patrol. That afternoon, Tematsu and Matome walked together through Akihabara. Matome looked nervous and a bit embarrassed. Tematsu asked her what people usually did on dates. Just then, Niwaka texted Matome, telling her to do whatever made her happy. Matome paused to think about what that might be, and then decided to start their date with some delicious food. Unbeknownst to them, Arisa and Niwaka were secretly watching from a distance. Matome led Tematsu to one of her favorite gourmet spots in Akihabara, a restaurant called Bengal that specialized in curry. Tematsu admitted he had never been there before. He said it took some courage to step into a place like that for the first time. He worried about things like whether the staff would be friendly or if the restaurant was actually run by people from India. Matome didn't pay much attention to his overthinking and quickly ordered 2 beef curries and 2 lassis. When their food arrived, Tematsu remarked that the curry seemed smoother than regular Indian curry. Matome corrected him, explaining that Bengal's curry was Indian style, not exactly Indian or European. When Tematsu took his first bite, his eyes lit up. The curry was incredibly good. It had the rich aroma and spices of Indian curry combined with the refined flavors of European cuisine, creating a perfect harmony between East and West. The meat was simmered to tender perfection, and he said there were no words to describe how good it was. Both of them enjoyed the meal with cheerful smiles, eating enthusiastically. Meanwhile, Arisa and Niwaka kept watching them through the restaurant window, quietly rooting for the pair. Tematsu also tried the lassi and said it tasted amazing. After finishing their meal, Madame stood up and told Tematsu it was time to head to their next destination. Madame invited Tematsu to Gansen, a well-known Chinese restaurant in Akihabara. The place had a wide variety of dishes, and those who followed their social media could stay updated on their special fried rice menus, including a limited edition beef tendon sauce fried rice that was only available once a week. Madame tried the fried rice right away, and her face lit up. It was incredibly delicious. Arisa and Niwaka also wanted to give it a try. Tematsu said the fried rice had a perfect texture, crispy yet soft, and the combination of beef tendon with the special sauce made it taste like something legendary. Madame's cheeks turned red from excitement as she enjoyed every bite. After that, they headed to Jiro's kitchen. Niwaka and Arisa were surprised to see them eating again. Tematsu had heard about Jiro's kitchen before but had never been there himself. This time, only Madame ordered something because Tematsu was already full. Madame began eating enthusiastically, commenting that the portions were big, the prices were cheap, and the food tasted amazing. She seemed to truly enjoy every bite. Curious, Tematsu took a small bite of Madame's food to see how it tasted. Matome looked a little flustered when Tematsu ended up eating from the same plate she had just used, but she quickly returned to her meal. Tematsu smiled as he watched her eat so happily. It made him hungry all over again just seeing her enjoy it. Madame blushed and took it as a compliment, thanking Tematsu before asking what he wanted to eat next. Arisa and Niwaka, still watching from afar, couldn't believe how close the two of them were acting. After Tematsu was completely full, they went for a walk in the park. Arisa and Niwaka continued to watch them from a distance, and Arisa commented that it didn't really look like a date, it was more like a food tour. Madame apologized for making Tematsu eat too much, but Tematsu told her not to worry and asked if she was still hungry. Madame explained that she had been in Akihabara for a long time, and there were times when food was scarce. She remembered what it felt like to be truly hungry, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. That's why, whenever she had the chance to eat, she wanted to enjoy as much as she could. Tematsu understood her feelings and said that being able to eat when hungry was part of what made people happy. Having food to enjoy meant they were living in peaceful times. Madame was touched by his words. After that, Tematsu invited her to one of his favorite places, Ramen Kajmusha. He was confident that Madame would love it. As soon as they walked in, someone named Tsurubashi suddenly came flying out of nowhere and crashed into Tematsu. Shocked, Tematsu asked what was going on. Tsurubashi mentioned something about Black Hole. It turned out there was a man known as Black Hole who was eating a massive amount of ramen and still wanted more. The total prize money he had demanded had already reached 240 yen. The shop owner asked him to stop because it was bad for business, but Black Hole refused, saying the owner had offered the prize in the first place. He insisted on getting more ramen. Tematsu had no idea who this Black Hole was until Tatsujin appeared and explained that Black Hole had been blocking others from eating, leaving everyone else hungry. Black Hole was actually a world champion competitive eater. Tematsu remembered hearing rumors that Black Hole had once been defeated and then disappeared. Tatsujin asked Tematsu to stop him. Tematsu confronted Black Hole, and the two exchanged sharp words before Black Hole challenged Tematsu to an eating contest. If Tematsu won, Black Hole promised to back down. Suddenly, Madame stepped in and accepted the challenge herself. The eating match was broadcast live by Clama's TV. Both Black Hole and Matome prepared to start the contest, agreeing that whoever lost would pay for all the food. Tematsu and the others came to cheer for Madame. Tematsu believed she could win, but Niwaka was nervous. If Madame lost, who would pay the bill? Black Hole asked if Madame really thought she could beat someone like him, but Madame confidently said yes. She believed Black Hole didn't appreciate the food he was eating, and someone like that didn't deserve to take more than his share. Masato acted as the event host, and the match began. Both Madame and Black Hole dug into their ramen with impressive energy. Tematsu and the others shouted encouragements as Madame kept eating. No matter how many bowls were placed in front of her, she seemed determined to finish them all. The audience was amazed by how gracefully Madame ate. She and Black Hole both emptied their bowls and reached for the next ones. Tematsu couldn't believe how fast they were going. The crowd's cheers grew louder with every bowl. By the 10th round, both Madame and Black Hole were still going strong. The competition was intense. They were evenly matched. Madame started thinking that it was time to find a way to win the contest once and for all. Madame tossed the noodles into the air, leaving everyone watching completely stunned. She then caught them gracefully with her chopsticks in her left hand and took a bite. The crowd was sure she did that to cool down the noodles, since it was faster than blowing on them. The audience cheered as Madame showed incredible skill and agility, flipping the noodles with lightning speed. Meanwhile, Black Hole started falling behind. Realizing he was losing, he asked for some water. To everyone's shock, he poured it straight into his ramen bowl to cool it down. The crowd gasped at what they saw as a food crime. Madame scolded him for disrespecting the ramen's creator, but Black Hole didn't care. He was willing to do anything to win. Tematsu called him a warrior who had fallen to the dark side of eating. Masato commented that Black Hole's eating style looked like something out of a skyscraper-level food challenge in Akihabara. Black Hole quickly regained his pace and took the lead again, which made Madame nervous. Tematsu knew they couldn't let that happen, especially since Tatsujin had no intention of paying for all that food. He whispered something to Tatsujin and borrowed one of her gadgets. Using it, he handed Matome an ice cube made with Tatsujin's device. Madame dropped the ice cube into her ramen to cool it down. Black Hole laughed, saying Matome had finally joined the dark side of competitive eating. But when the audience saw the frozen ice cube sitting perfectly in Madame's bowl, they realized she hadn't lost her integrity. She was still eating the right way. The crowd cheered her on as she started to take the lead again. Black Hole tried to catch up, but his luck ran out. He had drunk too much water, and the noodles in his stomach expanded, making it impossible for him to continue. With only 1 minute left on the clock, Madame asked for one more bowl while Black Hole was completely done. Matoma herself was already full, but she forced herself to take one last bite just as time ran out. When the match ended, Black Hole had eaten 30 bowls of ramen, but Madame won by a single bite. The crowd erupted in cheers. Black Hole couldn't believe he'd lost to a small girl. Madame approached him and told him she wouldn't make him pay for all the ramen, but she asked him to promise that he would never eat recklessly again. She wanted him to truly enjoy the flavor of food instead of treating it like a battle. However, Black Hole refused loudly, declaring that he wouldn't let this loss stop his plan to conquer Akihabara through hunger. It turned out that Black Hole was one of the bugged ones. He announced that he would devour everything in Akihabara to fulfill a promise he'd made to Matronica. Suddenly, he opened his mouth wide and started pulling everything nearby toward him, the tables, the food, and even people's clothes. Matoma almost got sucked in too. Tematsu quickly came up with a plan to stop him. He told Matome to jump toward Black Hole when he gave the signal. Then he threw the ice-making gadget, and in an instant, Black Hole's body froze solid. Matome dashed forward, grabbed his clothes, and pulled with all her strength. Black Hole was defeated and transformed back into ramen. Later that evening, Tematsu walked home with his friends. He thought the day's date had been pretty amazing. Matome apologized, saying their practice date hadn't gone smoothly, but Tematsu thought it was awesome. They'd managed to have fun and save Akihabara at the same time. Matome blushed, and soon her stomach growled, surprising everyone that she was hungry again. She said she wanted dessert and invited everyone to the convenience store for ice cream. But suddenly, Tematsu took her hand and led her toward a candy shop instead. He admitted he'd always wanted to go there but never had the courage to go alone. Madame, flustered, asked if he was really sure about going with her. Without hesitation, Tematsu smiled and pulled her along. Orisa and Yuaka were delighted to see them like that, and Madame couldn't hide her happiness as she walked hand in hand with Tematsu. Meanwhile, a mysterious girl was quietly watching them from a distance. That day, the group Manius was busy rehearsing for their concert. They sang and danced perfectly in sync, giving it their all. Tematsu watched them with a big smile, clearly enjoying the show, until Tsurubashi suddenly yelled at him to help carry equipment like everyone else. Tematsu argued that as the producer, his job was to watch the rehearsal and check their performance. Tsurubashi scolded him and told him to hurry up and put up all the posters. Not long after, Chibusa came over to see Matome and the others. She was confident that Manius would shine at the Akihabara festival. Orisa said it was all thanks to their amazing super ultra miracle hyper media producer Chibusa. Chibusa appreciated the compliment but humbly said that Manias had come this far because of their own hard work. Niwaka mentioned that they had been doing lots of little behind-the-scenes tasks too. Hearing that made Chibusa remember everything they had gone through together, from their quiet first concert to promoting Hizinamasu to strangers to performing at small events. After so many challenges, Manias had finally reached this moment, the day they were about to rise like stars in the sky. Chibusa also complimented Matome, saying she sang as if she were in love. She then playfully wondered if Matome might actually like someone. Matome's face turned bright red and she suddenly imagined Tematsu. Quickly, she denied it, and Orisa and Niwaka couldn't stop laughing. Unbeknownst to them, a girl was secretly watching from above. That same day, Tematsu was busy hanging posters for the Akihabara Summer Festival when Cage approached him and invited him out for lunch. They headed to a burger shop and Cage asked him about the festival. Tematsu said it seemed like it was going to be really exciting, especially since several guest stars were attending. The event was part of the Nice Japan program and was even sponsored by the government. During the press conference, someone from the Ministry of Science and Education announced that Akihabara had been designated as a special subculture zone. They had invited international artists who were passionate about Japanese culture to join the festival. At the same time, the government wanted to boost Japan's global image, and the Akihabara Festival was meant to strengthen that goal. Akihabara was known as the holy ground of many fandoms, and everyone was eager to enjoy the event. Cage commented that this summer really seemed to be powered by pure enthusiasm. Tematsu agreed, saying it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and that if he didn't give it his best, his pride as a man would be at stake. As part of the festival staff, he was also thrilled about the chance to get exclusive limited edition merchandise before anyone else. Cage admired Tematsu's passion. Meanwhile, the mysterious girl continued to quietly watch him from afar. The next morning, as a train conductor was heading to work, he noticed a crowd gathered by the roadside. When he checked it out, he saw a tree had been cut down and someone had left a piece of paper nearby. Later, when the owner of a furniture shop arrived at his store, he spotted a capsule toy lying on the floor. Assuming his intern was getting lazy and hadn't put it away properly, he went to pick it up, only to find the floor covered with dozens of capsule toys. Confused, he wondered who would go through the trouble of scattering them like that. On one of the toys, he found a small note that read, "Electric Mayonnaise." Meanwhile, a young boy bought an anime fan book at a local store. It was a new release by a well-known fan fiction writer called Type Question. But when he opened it outside, he was surprised to find the pages completely blank with only a slip of paper inside that said "Electric Mayonnaise." Around the same time, another man received a package containing a limited edition earphone figurine he had ordered online. When he opened the box, it too was empty, except for a single piece of paper that said "Electric Mayonnaise." Elsewhere, Tematsu was working with Manias, helping them with their needs. Orisa asked him to bring her a drink, Niwaka asked for a massage, and Matome asked for food. Tematsu was confused about why, as the so-called producer, he ended up doing errands like a personal assistant. Not long after, several representatives from Akihabara's community organizations suddenly showed up. Tsurubashi looked furious at Tematsu, Matome, and Orisa. Without much explanation, they were taken away for a special trial held by the Chuodori community members. During the hearing, Tematsu asked what they had done wrong. Tsurubashi couldn't believe that people who were supposed to protect Akihabara were actually the ones causing trouble, especially right before the Akihabara festival. Tematsu still didn't understand how they were supposedly disturbing the peace. Orisa demanded that they stop making false accusations, but Shohei claimed he already had proof. Tsurubashi played a video showing a series of crimes allegedly committed by Electric Mayonnaise. The footage included the cutting of trees along Showadori, where a card had been found with a message stating that Electric Mayonnaise had removed the trees to clear the view for trained photographers. The next case involved stolen capsule toys with only the empty capsules left behind at the store. Again, a card marked with Electric Mayonnaise was found at the scene. Other strange incidents were also recorded. Fan fiction books bought from Tora no Anna had turned blank, collectible figures had been tampered with, and trading cards that came with potato chip packs had been stolen. There was more than enough evidence to make the situation look suspicious. Tematsu strongly denied the accusations, insisting that no matter how reckless he and his friends might seem, they would never commit such acts. Tsurubashi then revealed another piece of evidence, a video showing graffiti on the walls of Miyajinzaka Bridge. The faces of several people were visible on the security footage. Tematsu quickly rejected the claim, arguing that the people in the video didn't look like him or his team. Kozakura, Tsurubashi, and Shohei began to doubt the resemblance as well. Arisa firmly denied the allegations too, saying the photo didn't look like her at all. Unfortunately, everyone's attention turned to one figure in the image, a girl facing away from the camera who looks somewhat like Matome. Tsurubashi tapped her gavel, noting that there was a possibility Matome could be the suspect. Tematsu immediately objected. When Tsurubashi asked whether he had proof, Tematsu explained that Matome was always with him and the others during their activities, so it couldn't have been her. He also added that he trusted her completely. Matome's face turned slightly red after hearing that. Tsurubashi stated that unless Tematsu and his team could prove their innocence, the court session would continue to press charges. Tematsu gently patted Tsurubashi's head and promised to find the real culprit. He even tried to act cool about it to earn her confidence. Later, back at their base, the group gathered to discuss what had happened. Arisa asked what they should do to catch the true criminal. Tematsu turned to Tatsujin for advice. Tatsujin suggested that the culprit might be committing these unspoken acts from an otaku's point of view to damage Electric Mayonnaise's reputation. Iwakan proposed that they start by observing possible target locations, hoping to catch the culprit in action, though no one yet knew where the next incident might take place. Matome kept staring at the photo of the girl who looked like her. Arisa asked if Matome had any idea where the next target could be, but she couldn't come up with an answer. After thinking for a moment, Tematsu guessed that the next location could be the Akihabara festival site. That night, the real culprits, 3 of them, showed up near the Akihabara Station festival stage. They were dressed like Electric Mayonnaise members and started rummaging through the trash in the area. Before long, Tematsu and his friends spotted them and stepped out from behind the stage in a dramatic pose. Tematsu then predicted that the culprits would appear to interfere with fans who had been lining up overnight to buy limited edition goods that would be released the next day. Arisa explained that the imposters were trying to ruin Electric Mayonnaise's image as Akihabara's protectors so they could take control of the area themselves. Tematsu became certain that these people were Bud ones because of their malicious intentions. While confronting them, Tematsu accidentally tripped and scolded his teammates for not being able to support him properly. 2 of the imposters, who looked like Tematsu and Arisa, started attacking. Despite their bulky builds, their moves were easy to dodge. Arisa managed to block an incoming punch, spin around, and flip her opponent to the ground. Tematsu avoided a strike and then dashed forward to land a punch to his opponent's stomach, but unexpectedly his arm got stuck and he was thrown backward. Arisa tried to counterattack with a quick strike, but she got hit in the face and fell. Tematsu realized that this group of imposters was stronger than he had expected, though Arisa still believed they could win. Meanwhile, Matome was fighting against an opponent who looked just like her. The enemy wielded a sword while Matome only had a baseball bat. During their clash, the enemy's strike tore part of Matome's outfit, catching her off guard. At the same time, Tematsu and Arisa combined their efforts to defeat their own opponents. They leaped into action, pulling from behind to strip away the imposters' disguises. In an instant, the enemies' appearances changed and their bodies shrank back to normal. After defeating the enemies, Arisa and Tematsu immediately started searching for one last opponent. Just as the enemy, who looked exactly like Matome, was about to swing her sword toward Matome, Tematsu quickly blocked the attack using his baseball bat. Arisa arrived a moment later to surround the attacker, which made the mysterious girl choose to escape before her identity could be revealed. She threw down a smoke bomb and disappeared into the haze. Tematsu sighed in frustration, annoyed by such an old-fashioned trick. Arisa then asked how they could possibly clear Matome's name from the accusations, since they had failed to capture the girl who looked just like her. Suddenly, Tatsujin appeared and said that she had taken clear photos of the entire scene using her new invention, a night vision camera with incredibly sharp image quality. Tematsu was overjoyed, realizing Tatsujin might have just saved them from all the false charges. None of them realized that the Matome lookalike was still secretly watching from a nearby rooftop. The next day, Tematsu presented the photos as solid evidence that Electric Mayonnaise was innocent. Tsurubashi and the others felt deeply sorry and apologized for misunderstanding them. Tematsu was relieved that Tsurubashi and the others finally understood. He even extended his hand to Tsurubashi as a sign of reconciliation, putting their past misunderstanding behind them. Tsurubashi was surprised that Tematsu and his friends were so forgiving, despite having been wrongly accused. Grateful, he thanked Tematsu sincerely. Tematsu gently patted Tsurubashi's head and invited everyone to work together to make the Akihabara festival a huge success. The atmosphere lightened up, and everyone seemed genuinely happy to be united again. The following day, the long-awaited Akihabara festival finally began. The audience cheered excitedly as the event opened. Mayonnaise took the stage for the opening performance while Niwaka and her friends got ready backstage to sing. Tematsu stood proudly in the front row, eager to watch his friends perform. However, just as the group was about to start singing, the power on stage suddenly went out. A breaking news segment from Columbus TV appeared announcing that the Akihabara festival had been officially cancelled by Minister Kioi. Kioi explained that after the government reviewed the festival's content, they had decided it was not suitable to be part of a national project. Although the government had previously supported Akihabara's culture as part of the Nice Japan initiative, Kioi claimed that the real focus of government support was on global pop culture in the fields of wellness, film, and music. She went on to say that certain aspects of otaku culture could negatively influence society and therefore the government would begin enforcing special regulations, including restrictions in the Akihabara area. Masato was shocked. Not only had the festival been cancelled, but Akihabara itself was now facing restrictions. He thought the decision was far too extreme, but Fukame calmly said that this was only the beginning and that their real battle had just started. Once the new rule took effect, all festival posters were removed and the festival stage was dismantled. Tematsu couldn't believe what was happening. A few moments later, Madama called him sounding worried. She told him about the imposter who resembled her. Tematsu grew anxious, fearing that the fake Matome might attack her again. Madama asked him to come to Mansubashi right away, but before she could finish speaking, the call was abruptly cut off. Panicking, Tematsu sprinted toward Mansubashi. When he arrived, he saw Matome lying unconscious on the ground. He quickly rushed to her side, trying to wake her up. But just as he leaned closer, she suddenly pressed her lips to his and a strange light began to glow around them. It turned out that the madwoman who kissed Tematsu wasn't the real one. It was the imposter, secretly plotting something sinister against Electric Mayonnaise. A few moments later, the real Matome arrived after receiving Tematsu's earlier message. She was horrified to find Tematsu lying unconscious near the river railing. Before she could react, Tematsu's body slipped into the river, disappearing beneath the water's surface. Madama screamed his name in shock and despair as the scene faded into silence. The person behind the ban in Akihabara turned out to be Fukame. That day, Fukame and Masato visited the office of Prime Minister Kioi, bringing along a suitcase full of money to bribe her. Kioi was genuinely grateful to the Matrotica organization for all their help. She felt relieved that she could finally get rid of what she called the rotten otaku from Akihabara. Kioi mentioned that anime, manga, and games should be completely removed from Japan, not just from Akihabara. She seemed irritated by how otaku often criticized others online but then talked about individual freedom and discrimination whenever they became the target of criticism. Kioi said it was time to make Japan more disciplined and morally upright. Unfortunately for her, Fukame wasn't interested in that way of thinking. Kioi, however, looked pleased with the amount of money she received. After leaving Kiyoi's office, Fukame asked Masato if he had proof of the money transfer. It turned out that Masato had recorded everything with a hidden camera in his tie. Fukame told him they needed to make the most out of Akihabara's ban and use it to tighten control over even more people. Not long after, a girl who looked a lot like Matome appeared beside Fukame. Her name was Orame, and Fukame gave her the next assignment. Meanwhile, Tematsu regained consciousness. Iwaka and the others were beyond relieved that he was still alive. Matoma hugged him tightly and cried, thinking she'd never see him again. Arisa was shocked to see that Tematsu's hair had gone back to normal. They went to a cafe where Madame urged Tematsu to eat a lot to help with his recovery. Momo brought him a drink made from Chinese snake garlic juice, believed to restore stamina. Tematsu noticed how the cafe seemed quieter than usual. Momo explained that it was because of the Akihabara ban. The cafe and many others were hit with administrative sanctions, causing a big drop in visitors. Tematsu was convinced this was the work of the Bud Ones. Tatsujin pointed out that rules were still rules and the issue had already become a national concern. Arisa suspected that a larger force was behind all this. Tematsu refused to let the Bud Ones do whatever they wanted in Akihabara and promised to uncover and defeat every last one of them. Suddenly, Madama told him he couldn't do that anymore. It turned out that Tematsu had returned to being an ordinary human, which meant he no longer had any superpowers. Arisa and Iwaka were both curious about how Tematsu's powers had suddenly disappeared. Madame explained that Tematsu had received divine energy that reversed her polarity, like trying to control two negatives at once. Tematsu then remembered what the fake version of Matoma had done to him. Arisa guessed it was like having a hard drive forcefully formatted. Madame told Tematsu that while he could no longer use his powers, he also wouldn't die from being exposed to sunlight anymore. She said he was free to leave Akihabara. There was no reason for him to stay. But Tematsu didn't want to leave so easily. He was worried about what might happen if the fake Matoma attacked again. Madame assured him that she would handle it herself. She added that Tematsu's current state would only slow them down. Frustrated, Tematsu demanded to have his powers back, arguing that if he had really been formatted, then he could be reinstalled too. Madame told him he should be happy to be human again, and that there was no need to go back. Tamatsu begged her to restore his powers, reminding her that he had always thought of them as friends. Arisa then said that the electric mayonnaise still had her and that she understood Tamatsu's worries. But in her opinion, Tamatsu should take it easy, enjoy his time doing household protection duties, and let her take over the mission of protecting Akihabara. Suddenly, a group of men in black suits entered the cafe. Arisa and the others became alert, ready to fight if necessary. But to their surprise, the men knelt down and begged Arisa to come back. They said they were ordered by Goldrich Diamond 13, the CEO of Shangri-La Thropy, to bring her home. Shangri-La Thropy, also known as Diamond, was one of the biggest conglomerates in America and considered a godlike figure in the business world. Everything Diamond did could affect global stock prices. Madame asked what they wanted with Arisa. Arisa explained that she had met Diamond while she was in America. After earning her MBA, she had spent some free time traveling around the country waiting for graduation day. One time, she attended a party full of industry leaders, and Diamond became fascinated by a dish she prepared that combined stewed beetles with avocado. At first, Diamond hired Arisa to be the personal architecture tutor for his granddaughter. Without realizing it, Arisa kept moving up until she became the first external vice chairperson. Diamond admired her abilities and often said she was the best candidate to become the next CEO. But Arisa had told him she wouldn't be ready until she turned 20. Now, Diamond's subordinates had sent an email explaining that Diamond was seriously ill and in critical condition. Arisa was shocked to hear that. The subordinates begged her to take the position because the global economy was in danger. That night, Arisa finally prepared to return to America. She still felt deeply indebted to Diamond, so she couldn't just stand by knowing that Diamond was sick. Tamatsu told Arisa not to worry about Akihabara, but he suddenly realized that he no longer had any superpowers either. Matome calmly said she was already used to handling things on her own. Arisa was deeply moved, and Niwaka couldn't stop hugging her. Tamatsu handed Arisa his limited edition Anatomy Rangers figure as a keepsake. Tears streamed down Arisa's face as she hugged everyone tightly. She realized that of all the places she had visited around the world, Akihabara was truly the most special. Not long after, the plane carrying Arisa took off into the night sky. Tamatsu and the others began walking back to their base. To Tamatsu's surprise, Akihabara had become unusually quiet. The lively and colorful energy that once filled the streets had vanished. He never imagined it would end up like this, especially after believing that electric mayonnaise could completely drag out the bud ones. Madame said that Tamatsu's battle had already come to an end. Tamatsu was puzzled by her words and sensed that she might be trying to distance herself from him. He found it hard to believe she could manage on her own after Arisa left, but Madame firmly said she was used to it and could take care of things herself. She then walked away, leaving Tamatsu frustrated. Kasugin gently calmed him down, reminding him that there wasn't much he could do now that his powers were gone. Tamatsu understood, but he still couldn't stop wondering why Madame wanted to push him away. Suddenly, Tsurubashi and his friends appeared. Tsurubashi announced that they were organizing a protest against the ban on Akihabara.